Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of T4SC Controversy. This is episode 6. At the time of this recording, it is Saturday, March 16th, 2024. I'm on with
During the
my
Sebring
racing.
12-hour.
What, Brandon?
During the Sebring 12-hour, just to get an idea.
During the Sebring 12-hour. As you heard, I have Brandon on. Brandon.
Hey.
And I have Dave on. Dave?
What's up?
So before we get into the main topic, which is the recap of the 2022 Formula One season, we're going to discuss, well, mainly Brandon and myself, but mainly Brandon, the season opener for Indycar. I've seen the highlights. I didn't see the full race live, but I did catch the highlights of it. I do remember that Joseph Newgarden just whipped the floor with everybody and just dominated and won with ease.
Yeah, well, I just want to bring up, too, that the commentators, of course, they mentioned this about 19 times, but if you look on Newgarden's Instagram and Twitter, he's currently following nobody, so he's pretty much sending a message of, I'm only focusing on my racing career and my family.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, I guess for some, racing is the main priority, and I'm guessing Joseph Newgarden is one of them.
Yep.
And Brandon, since you watched the IndyCar race live, what's your take on this IndyCar season opener from this year?
Well, I mean, St. Petersburg Street Circuit always provides some good action. I mean, let's flash back to 2023 when Romain Grosjean and Scott McLaughlin, they were both leaving the pits, and if they stayed where they were, they both would have cycled to 1 and 2. But of course, because this is Romain Grosjean and Scott McLaughlin, they battle both on cold tires just after pitting, and they wreck each other. Just another Height Street Circuit moment that unfortunately happened. But what can I say other than it's just a part of the sport?
And May, it's racing. I think I remember seeing that actually last year.
Yeah, I was in Lehigh Valley at the time for the TKC race.
I kind of figured. Real quick, how's the TKC Touring Car Championship going for you, Brandon?
Well, this winter season I didn't do the full season just because it is only the winter season and they're not going to be counting points. I mean, I did do a couple one-off races here and there, looking to go out back to Lehigh Valley. Last time in Rhode Island we were out, I got second in weight classes, and yes, they bought weight classes back. Definitely looking forward to some more racing at Lehigh Valley, but that's also at the same time a track that I have struggled with. So, always looking for a challenge.
Challenge is a challenge, and you're willing to accept what that challenge is whenever the opportunity comes your way. You're willing to accept it.
Absolutely.
Back into the IndyCar side from the season opener, what is your take on a scale of 1 to 20?
I'll give the race a 15. I think, it had its moments. We had a couple of cautions. There were a couple times of the racing just being spread out and not much happening, and then there was action sometimes everywhere in the field, but that's kind of how IndyCar street races pretty much go. I mean, in next weekend there's supposed to be the thermal $1 million challenge, which I think is going to be interesting. This silly season though definitely had some interesting moves. Like you have Romain Grosjean getting fired from Andretti and then threatening to sue Andretti.
I remember hearing about that.
Contract. Yeah, so Grosjean is suing Andretti. I don't know if the lawsuit is currently going on as we speak, but he is suing them for breach of contract.
I swear, Andretti is always finding some form of controversy, or controversy in some shape or form is finding Andretti. And it ain't and it's not in a good way either.
I could see why they fired him because, to be fair, he was destroying all those equipment. And
That
let's
is
be
true.
real, Roman Grosjean is known for being a very
Aggressive. Oh,
destructive driver.
way over aggressive.
Destructive.
That, but also way over aggressive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which he was in Formula
That's
One. But speaking of Formula One, as the title suggests, like we did with the 2023 season recap well over a month ago, we'll be doing the 2022 season this time around. First in line, we have the Bahrain Grand Prix. It was a Ferrari 1-2 at this one. Charles Leclerc taking the top honors, leading for 55 laps. Carlos Sainz finishing in P2, and Lewis Hamilton rounding out the podium in P3. Ferrari, Mercedes rounding out the podium. George Russell fourth, and Kevin Magnussen in the top 5. That's your top 5. Now, we all thought that Max Verstappen, well, I thought that Max Verstappen was going to get a good finish or finish in the points, let alone in the podium, but he had some sort of fuel pump or battery problem and retired a couple of laps short from the finish.
It was a battery problem.
I figured as much because he was going off about that on the radio with his race engineer. And then moments later, Checo spun in turn 1 and had also a mechanical related issue. Fuel pump, if I'm not mistaken. Leclerc set the fastest lap. Dave, Brandon, what's your take on the Bahrain Grand Prix from 2022?
I remember actually watching it live, and I remember it was very interesting to see Max and Leclerc go wheel to wheel. Two drivers that I have been a fan of, so it was definitely interesting to see, and it was nice to see Leclerc finally in that time period after almost like what 2-3 years of not winning, and now he has a powerful car. And I actually thought we were going to get something similar to when or B 2021 season. Sorry, my brain just stopped working, but something at least similar. But it was going to be a lot more respectful than the 2021 championship battle. And I seriously thought Ferrari was going to do it for like the first half of the season just because of how fast that Ferrari was, man. And unfortunately, Red Bull fixed their issues. Ferrari didn't add their modifications like the other teams did. Mercedes and McLaren were able to catch up, and it's just how it went.
I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen because this is the first race after, well, we know what happened down in Abu Dhabi. So, but Ferrari came out like they weren't joking when we saw the first pit stops. Like they were like really quick, and then of course, yeah, Red Bull had reliability problems. Well, first was what? No, it was Max first, and then Perez. And I think you could imagine how happy I was when Max was retiring.
You were cheering, weren't you?
Yep.
Oh, how that came to bite everybody back, though. They cheered then, but Max came back to bite, and he came back to bite hard.
Which we will get into later on as the season progresses. But on KMAG, though, I don't know. Well, it's up on YouTube with the well, I call it the radioactive, but it's Radio Rewind. With Kevin Magnussen's 5th place finish, I don't know if y'all remember. It's on Drive to Survive too, I believe. Regarding Gunther Steiner's reaction when K-Mag got that 5th place finish.
Yeah, I don't really keep up with Drive to Survive personally. I just never really got into it, so I can't really give an opinion.
Probably Gunther was probably ecstatic, just like when Haas first debuted and Roman Grosjean got the first points.
with 6th place in the 2016 Australian Grand Prix. Similar vibes, you
Yes.
could say. But in this case,
Yes.
I remember Gunther Steiner say, Kevin, that was some effing Viking comeback. That quote sticks out whenever I think about Kevin Magnussen finishing in the top 5 in this particular race. Proud moment for Haas, but speaking of Haas, his teammate Mick Schumacher finished in P11, just outside of the points. And that final point position went to Yo Guan Yu. In his debut race in Formula One, gets a top 10 finish with 10th place. Slow but steady progress at this stage in his rookie campaign. At this time, at least. Finishes behind Fernando Alonso in the Alpine with 9th place. Yuki Tsunoda with 8th place. Esteban Ocon with 7th place. And Valtteri Bottas with P6 after starting in P6. And again, the Red Bulls scoring nothing given their reliability woes. Max Verstappen with his battery problem, and then Checo with a fuel pump problem, and Pierre Gasly with a fire with a power unit, and Charles Leclerc with the fastest lap. And again, led the most laps in this race from the pole position, winning with ease. Teammate Carlos Sainz, again, Ferrari 1-2 finish, finishes in P2, 5.5 seconds behind his teammate. Pretty much the Ferraris dominated this race and led every single lap. Leclerc led for 55 laps out of 57, and Carlos Sainz leading the other two. On to the next race, which is Saudi. If y'all remember the DRS tactic that Max and Leclerc had at the end of the safety car periods, y'all can go in detail on that in that regard.
Yeah, I remember Australia. It was in a way, it was almost like the same situation as Bahrain, where Max and Leclerc were just going at it, and then next thing you know, Max's engine cuts out. But yeah, I don't really think there's a whole lot to say about the Australia. I don't. I mean, then again, though, it was like 2 in the morning. I don't really remember too much of that race, but you know,
Pretty much it was what Leclerc did in Bahrain. You know, he pretty much, well, kind of used the DRS, but you know, we saw pretty much a year prior that no one wants to go through that final DRS detection just before the start finish line.
And as you said, we're calling 2021. That we touched on this in the pilot, if you remember.
Yes.
That is arguably and most notably speaking, the talking point when it comes to the 2021 edition of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Despite Lewis Hamilton winning, which was to date, as of this recording, his latest win in Formula One, by the way. But in this case, in the 2022 edition of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Lewis finishes in 10th. At least he still got a championship point for that.
he also got lapped too. Thought I mentioned that. It's almost like back
He
in.
almost got lapped. Almost.
Yeah, no, I think he did get lapped in that race because he was like what 13th, 12th in that race, and that was when the W13 was also like
Starting to,
you know, box.
you pretty much just summed it up. Took the words right out of my mouth. Same for the McLaren as well. Same for the McLaren.
Yeah, no, guys, I've driven the W13 on multiple occasions in iRacing, and you know, it can be fun sometimes, but oh, Jesus Christ, around high-speed corners, it's an absolute nightmare.
How much of a nightmare we're talking about?
Like you're losing a couple tenths depending on what track you're at and what setup you're on, but you know, I just thought I'd bring this up now because I'm currently watching the running order right now. The 01 Chip Ganassi Cadillac is currently leading in the last hour of the 12 hours of Sebring.
Question is, we're going to the 12 hours of Sebring real quick. Brandon, who do you think is going to come out on top?
Oh, Cadillac, without a doubt. Look at the straight line speed that thing has.
So you betting your money on Cadillac.
Yes, I am.
All right. Cadillac was close to entering Formula One with the Andretti, which we touched on a while back. Didn't you say, Brandon, that we were defending Cadillac and Andretti so much that they should consider sponsoring us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take some sponsorship over nothing. But I mean, I did mention how it was complete BS how F1 wants a American expansion, and when they get offered one of the greatest American icons when it comes to motorsport, they completely turn it down.
Well, we still have an American F1 team in Haas, but
I don't know about that one. After these last couple years, I don't know about that one, man.
yeah, it's still American. It's still I can't even talk.
I mean,
It's
yes,
still an American
they
team,
are
though.
They are based in Kannapolis, North Carolina, but at the
Exactly
end of
my
the day,
point.
with all the sponsorships and the fact that they have a facility in, I think they have one facility in Italy and England, if I'm not wrong.
I
Correct
think
me
they
if I'm
pointed that out
wrong,
in Drive to Survive in one of the episodes. Now that you bring that up,
but um, but at the end, and they also another thing, they also have a Ferrari engine. So at the end of the day, are they really American?
well, at the end of the day, they're logically speaking still an American-based team.
Yeah, but it's almost like Red Bull saying that they're Austrian despite everything they have being based in
Milton Keynes in UK.
yeah, Milton. Yeah.
Which, speaking of, the Red Bull team got the job done, with Max Verstappen coming out on top in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix of 2022, having led only 6 laps of the 50 laps run in this race in the 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, much like in Bahrain, led the most laps
It
of
was a
30.
DRS train.
What?
It was a DRS train.
You're going to see plenty. I'm pretty sure we've seen plenty of that in this race,
Yeah,
especially
there
in
was
Monza
plenty of
over
that.
the years.
Dude. Oh, better yet, if you want to actually pick up something that was actually interesting from that race, there was the Alpine situation between Alonso and Ocon that forever put the dent in Ocon's reputation as a driver.
I remember. And that wasn't the only race, too. That wasn't the only time in the season regarding Alcon's perspective. Dave, what's your take on this particular race and that moment with the two Alpines going head to head?
I mean, well, we see now that, the Alpine team, well, they've been going down and, that race didn't really paint a good picture for them.
And especially considering Fernando Alonso retired 35 laps in due to a power unit problem. As for his teammate Esteban Ocon, he got a top 6 finish, with 6 scoring 8 points in that sense, albeit almost a minute behind the race winner Max Verstappen, who beat both of the Ferraris, as the Ferraris finished second and third respectively. Charles Leclerc with second place, Carlos Sainz with third after starting in third, Sergio Perez with fourth, George Russell rounding out the top 5. And Checo also had time in the lead, leading for 14 laps out of the 50 laps run. Again, Charles Leclerc, much like in Bahrain, led the most laps, 30 out of 50, and set fastest lap. Kevin Magnussen, as we touched on Haas earlier, with the 9th place finish. Well, even though it was kind of a few spots below where we finished in Bahrain, from 5th to 9th in this case, with 9th place in Saudi, still slow but steady progress at this stage. As for teammate Mick Schumacher, he did not start the race due to a qualifying crash he had.
Yeah, that was a heavy impact, especially it was the blind. Well, yeah, you can say it's one of those blinding S's, but he just took too much curve and he just went into the wall.
And had that vicious shunt that vicious shunt into the barriers. And apparently Yuki Tsunoda did not start either. We have,
didn't he also have a problem
sorry,
that he just didn't Yuki also have a problem that he wasn't able to start?
I think he had a mechanical problem. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong when I say that. Yuki Tsunoda aside, 5 drivers did not see the checkered flag. Goat Latifi. He ain't the damn goat. I'm sorry. Nicholas Latifi. No surprise.
Wait,
Crashed.
who's saying he's the GOAT?
Not me. But you'll be surprised on how many people that I see on the internet that say that he's the GOAT. You'll be surprised.
Do we actually? I was about to say, do we actually have somebody listening?
We have a decent amount of people that listen to these podcast episodes. But you'll be surprised, Brandon, how many people that I've seen on the internet that say that Nicholas Latifi is the GOAT. You'd be surprised.
Well, then again, though, it is a part of a meme, so.
And the same for Pastor Maldonado when he was racing in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's gonna pretty much do that. So it's just a trend.
An ongoing trend. And now they're saying the same thing for Logan Sargent, from what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, he's the new GOAT.
Quote unquote
Yeah.
GOAT.
I mean, then again, though, Sargent's got a lot of development to do, especially because, guys, he's a rookie in a Williams, so
Sophomore
I
now.
don't expect, or well, yeah, now sophomore. At the time, he was a rookie in a Williams, so it's not like I have high expectations for that anyway.
I remember we touched on that when we recapped the 2023 F1 season over a month ago.
Yeah.
And Calvin, you did before we did the podcast, you did ask like who are the rookies that, or who would I have expectations on? And I did say that on Logan Sargent, he's a really good driver, but I didn't have high expectations because he was in a Williams, just because how they were performing.
And given where Williams were at the back of the barrel most of the time.
Yeah, so I didn't have high expectations for him scoring. Not just because of him, it's just the machinery he's given.
And the machine that the car that Williams developed last year, it was not that good. Was it in the point? Did he finish in the points? Yes. But as far as top fives is concerned, at least top fives, me being generous when I say that, given where Williams are nowadays, that is actually something good instead of subpar or mediocre. Again, because this is Williams speaking, that has won Constructors' Championships, Drivers' Championships during the 80s and 90s decade.
Threat during
Yes, it is a legendary team.
Exactly my point. So at least a top 5 finish from that team is something, instead of saying mediocre performance and subpar performance every single week, given where they are nowadays. And it's sad.
Well,
reason why, go ahead, Dave.
Reason why that the new owners of Williams, Darlington Capital, wanted to keep the name because it's legendary. There's no reason to change it. Like a couple teams we see right now on the grid with the dumbest names,
such as
Visa, Cash App, dude. They're still Toro Rosso.
I was about to say, you mean Toro Rosso?
And depending on where they race, it could be Stake F1 or Pick Sauber, to places that gambling is illegal, so they can't have stake on there.
In the case of Sauber, aka in 2022,
Alfa Romeo. Yeah.
You pretty much just took the words right out of my mouth. Alfa Romeo team in this Saudi Arabian Grand Prix 2022, they were mediocre. Juan Yuzo with 11th place, and Valtteri Bottas did not finish the race. After 36 laps in, he had overheating problems. Alex Albon crashed out. Same for Nicholas Latifi. After 14 laps in, crashes out in the case of Nicholas Latifi. Daniel Ricciardo had a clutch problem. And Fernando Alonso, as I mentioned before, had a power unit issue. Y'all probably won't be surprised when I say this next. Lance Stroll finished a lap down in 13th place after starting in 13th place.
Yeah, not surprised.
I mean, Lance Stroll's extremely inconsistent. So, like 1 minute he's actually doing extremely good, and then the next weekend he's getting lapped.
In this case, he got lapped.
Oh yeah,
But at this stage, even though it's still mad early, 2 races in, Charles Leclerc leads in the points by 12 points over Carlos Sainz. Max Verstappen is in the mix as he gets himself in the top 3, albeit 20 points behind after his win in Saudi. Red Bull with their RB8, even nowadays with the RB20 in 2024, even with the RB19 from 2023. But in 2022, the RB18 that was ran in 2022, Red Bull had the advantage. I had my friend Alex pointed this out to me. Red Bull had the advantage on the straights. Ferrari had the advantage in the corners. But in this case,
Yeah.
Saudi, with all those straights, that played into the hands of Red Bull. Even though Checo got 4th, it's still a top 5 finish, so it's still a solid result. But the top 7 of the podium is where you want to be, and Red Bull got just that, with Max Verstappen coming out on top. P1 for car number 1. And Brandon, giving you a Max Verstappen head, I can imagine your reaction if you're watching it live, that is.
yeah, and when he had that engine failure, yeah.
Which
in
that
Australia.
happened in the following round in Australia. Had a
Yeah.
fuel leak
I mean,
problem,
the first half
according to
of
Racing Reference.
the year, the first half of the year was definitely tough because I actually, for a brief period of time, thought maybe he won't actually end up winning this. And no, I actually wasn't against the idea of a Charles Leclerc World Championship, but at the same time,
But aren't you a fan of
Oh.
Charles Leclerc too?
sorry, dude, I got a massive headache, dude, right now. Ow.
You good?
Feels like I just got slapped. Dude, it feels like I just got slapped by a printer. I swear, if one of you have a Brandon Devine voodoo doll, I swear.
I do not.
Why does it feel like my head just got hit by a printer?
Maybe it's because of the fact you're watching this 12 hours of Sebring as we speak?
Probably.
Or is it you remember recalling these events from the 2022 F1 season? Or it could be both.
I don't remember like every lap of every race exactly, but there were obviously some infamous moments that definitely can be talked about, like
Especially when we get to the
Virgo's
French Grand
Hamilton.
Prix. Especially that. But Brandon, you said that Max Verstappen had a mechanical problem in Australia.
Yeah, his engine caught fire basically. So
I remember, and that's exactly what happened. 38 laps in. We're tied because of that reason. Sebastian Vettel, we didn't mention his name until now. All throughout, we didn't mention his name in the podcast yet until now. Unfortunately, he crashed out 22 laps in, and Carlos Sainz spun off on the opening lap. But on one hand, on the other side of the Ferrari garage, there was Cloud 9. In other words, Charles Leclerc, pole position, fastest lap, led all 58 laps, race win, gets that grand slam, beating Checo Perez, who finishes in P2, 20 and a half seconds behind, followed by George Russell getting his first podium for Mercedes, finishing 3rd, his 2nd in all in his F1 career at this stage. Lewis Hamilton in P4, Lando Norris in P5. Daniel Ricciardo in his home race finishes 6th, Esteban Ocon with 7th, Valtteri Bottas with P8, Pierre Gasly with P9, and Alexander Albon with P10. Dave, Brandon, this was the
yeah,
Australian. This was the race where the Albert Park circuit had an upgrade.
yeah, there were more straights, which made for. I thought it was going to make for more interesting racing at the time when they announced it, but now that this is a year where Red Bull's fast in the corners, Red Bull's fast on the straights. We are all fucked at the end of the day. I think these modifications had some good intentions, but at the same time, in some places, it feels like the FIA was quite literally listening to the people who review the F1 games when they were complaining about places like Abu Dhabi and Australia and Silverstone.
Again, me and Max, you can imagine. But I was surprised that Albon was able to get into the top 10.
Which he did.
Unlike his teammates.
Who finished in 16th, a lap down.
Yes.
Surprised? Because I'm not.
Latifi, not really. But yeah.
Same for Haas to an extent, because both Haas cars in this race finished a lap down. But Mick did get the better of Kevin, considering Mick finished in 13th, K-Mag with P14. But
and again, not a good start for Alonso either, because he pretty much finished last in 17th.
Oh, and a lap down too, despite starting 10th on the grid.
Yeah. But it was also a good result, I guess, depending on who you ask. For Ricardo, he finished just behind Norris.
Which he did, with again, P6 for the Honey Badger. But Alex Albon, though, going back to him real fast, this is his first races back in Formula One after sitting out in 2021 after Red Bull kicked him to the curb. If y'all remember that.
Yes.
So, for the sake of Alex Albon, this top 10 finish for Williams, this was a good sign to see in his case that he can get the job done. And he did just that. On to the next race now, which is the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Well, I call it the San Marino Grand Prix.
That was also the race Hamilton got lapped at.
Yes, I was about to point that out. And me being a Hamilton fan, when I saw that live, Hamilton getting lapped,
it truly marked the end of an era.
Simply put, that was painful to see. Of course, me being a Hamilton fan, of course, I'm going to say that. Dave, I'm sure you can say the same thing, given you're also a Hamilton fan.
Yeah, I mean this was I guess you could say, the first year that Mercedes got it wrong in a way. It kind of worked good on Russell's side of the garage, but Hamilton, not really. Just because they were, experimenting with the with setups, and you can tell that the race setup for this race was not that good.
In the case of Lewis Hamilton, because again, unfortunately, he finished a lap down in 13th place. 13th in the W13. That's kind
I'm pretty
of
sure his race setup was set up and it probably burned through the tires. Because that track is, it has elevations, incline, decline, slight banks, but off camber. But yeah, it can be a little hard on tires and depending on the setup. But it was not it was not a good race for Hamilton.
Again, 13th, a lap down. P13 in the W13. Kind of funny to say, in a sense. But his teammate, on the other hand, George Russell, after starting 11th on the grid, got P4. So for Mercedes, it's something better than nothing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you guys can do anything to the W13, what are you guys doing? If you guys, as Mercedes fans, how would you guys dispose of the W13?
Ooh.
Anything. You could throw it in an incinerator. You can nuke it. You could chuck it in a volcano. How would you dispose of the W13? Come on,
Calvin, you can go first.
You want to know? You really want to know?
How would you dispose of it?
Yes. he's leaving us on a cliffhanger.
Exactly.
He's probably thinking of the most
Exactly.
brutal way. He's probably thinking of the most brutal way to dispose of the W13.
Oh, I know one way, but I'll wait
Wait,
till
what?
what Calvin said. I know I have a way, but I'll wait till what you say.
Dave, you want to say it?
Okay. Yeah. For me, I would just repaint it the similar to the 2020 Ferrari, so no one expected the Mercedes.
Yeah. It's weird to think that the same people, it's weird to think that the same people that built a record-breaking car like the W11 can build something like the W12 and W13. Now, it's just confusing.
For me, on the disposing side of things, dispose of it, crash it, and let it burn in hell. That's all I'm going to say. Crash and let it burn in hell. Given how mediocre the W13 was.
If I was a Mercedes fan, I would have parked it in Detroit and just let those people like show up, put it on the rims, and let them like steal everything on it. So that way, when they're done with it, it's just a shell of carbon fiber.
Oh, I would like to see how people are. I would like to see how they manage to get the tire off. If they can get it quicker than Mercedes did for Bottas after Monaco,
Monaco 2021.
then yeah, then I would be impressed.
Apparently, it took 3 days to get that damn tire off.
Yeah,
It
because
took 48 hours and 1 minute actually to get it off.
The longest pit stop in F1 history, folks.
yeah, that should be a Guinness World Record.
Exactly.
That's one record I would not want my name against.
Just a quick question, but did you guys ever see this today? I don't really keep up with Formula E too much, but there was a last lap pass for the win today in Sao Paulo, which, you know what, say what you want about Formula E, but at least it's more action than F1 these days.
No, I did not see or hear about it.
Yeah, the race was decided on a last lap pass.
I mean, isn't that how most passes are towards the end for Formula E?
Yeah, then again though, they race. If you've ever watched like at least one full length race, you'll see how constantly aggressive they are lap after lap, which is quite unique to watch. Like, you know, I don't watch it for the electric aspect. I watch it because it usually ends up being a shit show. And luckily too, the races aren't even that long. They're very digestible. A full length Formula E race is 45 minutes.
That's actually not that bad. But then again, you took Brandon. You said Formula E. You only watch it for the
Show aspect, yeah.
You pretty much just summed it up. But would you grade would you both grade the 2022 Emilio San Marino Grand Prix in that sense?
I'd say it was an interesting race. Yeah, there wasn't, other than the rain, the whole rain and DRS part that everybody was complaining about at the time. I somehow remember that. Yeah,
I mean, I guess it was kind of interesting, a little boring at times, mostly for the DRS trains, but yeah, it was pretty decent.
We touched on Lewis Hamilton finishing a lap down numerous times, which is, well, Dave, for me and you, the sad part. But you know what's even more sad? When this was the race when Charles Leclerc was right there for a podium finish, but threw it away, spun and crashed.
Yeah, he went too aggressive on those curbs.
That was also painful to see.
and then Lando Norris is able to slip on through.
And got a podium with P3 behind the Red Bulls. Red Bull 1-2 in this one. The up to this point, the last 1-2 finish, Dave, Brandon, I know it, but question is, do y'all remember when, again, up to that point, when the last Red Bull 1-2 finish was at?
It was 2013, I believe. I
Dave?
might be wrong, but
What was that question?
You remember the last Red Bull 1-2 finish prior to Imola 2022? You want me to say it?
Yes.
Malaysia 2016.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought I would think of something else, but yeah, that's what I thought.
On that day, Daniel Ricciardo won, Max Verstappen P2, Nico Rosberg P3. Though Hamilton should have won that had the damn power unit not caught fire. But that's a story for another time. But going to the top 5 again from the 2022 San Marino Grand Prix. Red Bull 1-2, like I mentioned before, Max Verstappen leading every single lap. And much like Leclerc did at the Australian Grand Prix, Max Verstappen does the Grand Slam. Pole position, fastest lap, leads all 63 laps, race win. P1 for car number 1. Number 1 on this particular occasion was indeed the magic number. Checo Perez, his teammate in P2. Again, Red Bull 1-2 finish, with Lando Norris in the McLaren rounding out the podium in P3, which, spoiler alert, this was the only podium finish McLaren were able to salvage throughout the whole 2022 season. The only podium finish. George Russell with P4, Valtteri Bottas with P5. But Leclerc did, despite that spin and crashing into the barrier, he did come back to finish in 6th place. Though it should have been a podium finish. But he still got points, at least. Yuki Tsunoda with P7, Sebastian Vettel with P8, K-Mag with P9, and Lance Stroll with P10. I believe this was the first race of the first weekend in the season where they had the sprint weekend, which, if I'm not mistaken, Max won that one. But then we come to Miami for the Miami Grand Prix, which, Dave, I think you told me this a couple of years ago that you had plans to go to this race.
I wanted to, just because you know, this is Miami, so you know, it's the second. I guess it was closer than like Texas from where we are. But you know, the prices were a little high. Not as high as Vegas, but you know, a little up there.
Dude, the Vegas price, the ticket prices for Vegas, we're talking thousands of dollars, if not close to $1 million, depending on what you're looking at. But then again, we go to again, if you compare which one to Vegas or Miami, because the prices are a bit lower than what Vegas has to offer. And speaking of the Miami Grand Prix or Vice City Grand, if y'all play GTA, if you know, you know. Max Verstappen victorious after leading for 48 laps. 48 laps led out of the 57 laps run, outclassing the two Ferraris, as the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz round out the podium, with second and third respectively. Despite Leclerc winning the pole, could not seal the deal, despite leading 8 laps. Carlos Sainz led for 1 lap and got a podium finish with third. Checo, much like an Imola, finishes in P4, followed by the 2 Mercedes cars. George Russell P5, Lewis Hamilton P6, after starting in P6. Valtteri Bottas with P7, Esteban Ocon with P8, Alexander Albon with P9, getting those points for Williams. Small, but it's something to get Williams out of the blocks. And Lance Stroll with P10, after starting in P10. 5 drivers did not see the checkered flag. Zhou Guanyu with a water leak, Lando Norris following a crash, which I remember vividly. Well, not vividly, but I remember bits and pieces of it. I remember spinning like a top in that one. Pierre Gasly with a suspension problem. Sebastian Vettel also crashed out after he and Mick Schumacher got into a tangle in turn 1. And Kevin Magnussen with a wing problem, apparently. Max Verstappen with the fastest lap. Forgot to mention this too at the beginning stages of the 2022 season. Regarding the Alpine cars. Y'all remember the first couple of races? they had the pink livery. I wouldn't be surprised if people
that was
dubbed it as the
something
racing point. What, Brandon?
that was something I never understood. I never understood why they went for two and they had two liveries, one for the first half, one for the second half. I mean, at least they fixed that now, despite the new Alpine now being the slowest car on the field as of right now, 2024, 3 rounds in. Can I just bring up they actually voice crack? Wow. They actually posted to their Instagram. Feel free to ask questions for Alpine. A very bold post because all of them were just making fun of that car that they have.
I wouldn't be surprised given how slow they are to come out of the
Oh
blocks
yeah.
to get the 2024 season underway in that sense. But Brandon, Dave, your thoughts on the Vice City Grand Prix? Again, if you play GTA or heard of GTA, if you
It
know,
wasn't
you
really.
know.
I just want to bring up that race is actually on my birthday, May 8th.
Oh, really?
Just on my birthday, May 8th. Yeah.
In Oliver Bamman.
Yeah, so that was unique. I actually wanted to go to that race for my birthday, but ticket prices, I say more?
You touched on it in one of the episodes we did.
Yeah.
You saw the prices for it and you had plans to go and then you saw the prices
It was
and then
hell
you
no.
said, yeah, nope.
It was a hell no.
I mean, again, this was pretty much the opener or the debut of Miami because this is their first race. So
Which it was.
that I guess it was exciting, or it really no, the race was something, especially that crash with Norris.
And with
But
7 to a degree.
yeah. But there was also some hectic during qualifying too. But yeah, I mean, this was a pretty decent race also.
Yeah, Miami was decent. However, though, Miami has yet to have like a good race in general. Like in 2023, Las Vegas, to its credit, I thought it was going to be boring, but I'm ashamed to admit it, but Las Vegas was actually a pretty good race. And,
You
and
said
see
you
what
were ashamed to
2024
admit it.
brings. Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit it, but Las Vegas actually gave us good racing, especially that last lap pass between Leclerc and Checo. But Miami just has yet to have a good race. Like I can tell you right now, if you actually go watch the highlights on YouTube, it's like 7 minutes long because not that much happened in that race anyway, other than the Leclerc and Max battle between laps like 30 and 31. And there was also a battle between Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. I know it was weird at the time seeing a Alfa Romeo battle a Mercedes, but here we are.
And them being former teammates. Because Valtteri was with
Mhm.
Mercedes season prior. And in the season prior before that, and before that, and before that, and before that. And those two finished 6th and 7th, respectively, in this case. Hamilton getting the better of Valtteri, though. Hamilton with
Oh yeah.
P6 and Valtteri with P7. Former teammates. But in the end, they still had plenty of work. Well, Mercedes especially had plenty of work to do. Which, regarding Hamilton real quick, I don't know if y'all seen this on Instagram 2 years ago. Do y'all remember seeing a video of him in the press conference room? I think it was during preseason testing or the season opener in Bahrain. Someone asked him if Mercedes made a mistake for the first time.
Hmm.
Hamilton, in response, asked why would he feel that way, and backs it up saying that the team has won 8 in a row as far as constructors championship is concerned. And then at the end of the clip, he said this: "My team don't make mistakes. Yet, at this stage, Hamilton is P6 in the standings. George Russell, his teammate, ahead of him in P4, again at the conclusion of the Vice City Grand Prix. Once again, if y'all play GTA or heard of GTA, you know why I say that.
Yeah, how could you not?
Brandon, you get it. You get it. Dave, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Just want to make sure. But
Yeah,
again,
'cause,
to
like,
those listeners out there, to why I say Vice City instead of Miami, again, if you know, you know. Right, getting back on track, no pun intended. We have the Spanish Grand Prix, which, like in Imola, it's a
Wayne
Red
Tyler
Bull.
Racing takes the lead with 3 minutes to go.
What?
Wayne Tyler Racing takes the lead with 3 minutes to go from Sebastian Bourdais. Can Cadillac fight back? I don't know, man.
You said you
The
bet your
yellow
money on
Cadillac.
Cadillac. So for your sake, you best keep your fingers crossed that Cadillac pulls a miracle right out of the butts.
Dude, if Cadillac, especially because Sebastian Bourdais is driving, and I actually really like him. So if he does not win, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Brandon,
You know, Delatras, I love you and all, but I need Sebastian Bourdais to win this.
and if he doesn't,
I will. I probably shouldn't say this on hot mic, so I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
if it's inappropriate,
Yes,
I advise you keep your mouth shut.
I'm not gonna be doing that. Yeah, I'm not gonna be doing that.
Right then, again, moving on, we have the Spanish Grand Prix. This was the race where I remember that, Dave, you probably remember it too. Same for you, Brandon. But Dave, you and me being Lewis Hamilton fans, you remember the opening lap? Lewis Hamilton got into it with Kevin Magnussen at turn 4.
Yeah. I really don't. Well, I'm pretty sure this is not gonna be the first time or be the last time we talked about Hamilton and Magnussen. So
And let alone Hamilton getting into it with somebody on the opening lap. Because there's another one
yeah,
in that regard. But we'll get into that as we progress through the season. But even with that contact that those two made, Lewis still got the better of K-Mag with a top 5 finish. Though it could have been 4th, but the team got on the radio and told him to take it easy because of him saving the power unit. So that's why instead of 4th, he got 5th because he was saving the power unit as much as possible or some sort of component in the W13. And as for his teammate George Russell, he got a podium finish behind the 2 Red Bulls with 3rd place. Checo with P2 after leading for 12 laps, and Max Verstappen, as you would probably guess, led the most laps, 24 of 66.
He actually spun in the middle of the race too, and he still won.
He did. Went off the road, and he still won. Dude, ever since, because this was a year, by the way, we had these regs, and how these cars are shaped. 2020, I can't even talk. 2022, this was the year it started with today's generation of F1 cars. 2022 was when it started, and ever since then, Australia and Bahrain aside, Max Verstappen has been on it, especially in
Last corner.
2023. But 2022, we were witnessing the begin. Brandon, you can agree with what I'm saying. We witnessed the beginning of greatness. In other words, we were pretty much witnessing history.
Wayne Tyler Racing has won the 12 hours of Sebring.
And how do you feel about that in that sense?
I mean, good for them. That was the same car Colton Herta was driving back during the 24 hours of Daytona, so that's good. I mean, this, well, it used to be Wayne Tyler Racing. Technically, it's Andretti Wayne Tyler Racing. Bit of a mouthful, but here we go. And the Lamborghini in its debut finished P7 out of 12 hypercars, so good for them. Progress.
Hats off to them. Hey, it's something better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, progress.
Well, 2 drivers that did not make any progress in this race in the Spanish Grand Prix of 2022, Charles Leclerc and Guan Yu Zhou. Well, you would think it would be Charles Leclerc given he led for the first 26 laps, but then the turbo gave out. And then Guan Yu Zhou had an engine problem. And Leclerc from pole position, too, in this race. From the pole position ends up with nothing. But Ferrari did score points, though, nonetheless, with 12, courtesy of Carlos Sainz with 4th place. Again, Lewis Hamilton with P5, Valtteri Bottas with P6. Again, Lewis getting the better of Valtteri. P7 for Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris with P8, the Flying Fernando with P9 in his home race. Both the Spaniards in the points in their home race, actually. Yuki Tsunoda with the top 10 finish, albeit a lap down. And at this stage, Max Verstappen takes over the lead in the championship table by 6 points ahead of Charles Leclerc, 25 ahead of Checo, 36 ahead of George Russell, and 45 ahead of Carlos Sainz. Dave, Brandon, your thoughts, comments on the 2022 Spanish Grand Prix?
At this point, I think it's just going to be a repetitive process of, until we at least get to Silverstone, of Max lead, Max win.
Wait a
couple
minute.
of action down the midfield, which
Wait a minute, Dave. You sent me some. It was a TikTok video where this dude excluded Max Verstappen.
Yes.
So in your case, in this sense, in your case, Checo won this one. George Russell P2, Carlos Sainz P3 in your book.
Yes. Pretty much.
And in your case, then, Charles Leclerc leads in the points.
Yeah.
We move on to Monaco. Do y'all remember the qualifying session?
I mean, that was the big talking point of the weekend.
Regarding Checo when he crashed.
Yes.
Some say it was deliberate, others say it was a mistake on his part. But I want to hear from you both. Was it deliberate or was it a mistake?
I mean, at the same time, I guess it is a challenge to not get on the gas that early, which does happen in racing. So, I mean, looking back, maybe it was kind of a mistake. So
To me, it looked like it was a mistake, but I don't know if you can believe that Checo did say he did it intentionally. But I don't know why would you do that. I know to keep, pole position, but
Speaking on that, Charles Leclerc still got the pole nonetheless. Even though I think Max was on a quicker lap time, seconds before Checo spun and crashed at the Portier section. Hence why Max was upset. And speaking of Max Verstappen, he started 4th on the grid and moved up a place to finish 3rd in the Monaco Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, again, got the pole position, which he should have won, or at least got a podium, but he should have won. You know what I'm talking about. The pit stop.
oh yeah,
let's just say Ferrari will be Ferrari.
When he said, why, what are we doing?
They do. I know those radios are delayed, but it looks like it was the perfect timing. They do have monitors to know where you are, so you can. They tell you to pit, but then they say don't while you're already there. It's almost what was that? I think was that 2018, I believe, when they were in Hockenheim. They told Hamilton to pit, but they said no.
Yes, Hockenheim 2018.
Yeah. And
Infamous.
he thought he was going to get.
That was it.
Yeah. So it was similar like that, but of course, Monaco, you can't you can't cut any pit lane lines.
Because
once you're in, you're
is
in.
right there.
Yeah.
So Leclerc had no choice. And, well,
Yep.
hey, he finished the Monaco Grand Prix for once. So we can say that. But still, he
Yeah, I
finished
mean,
the podium, let alone won the damn thing.
Yeah, but if you follow Leclerc in his lower categories, him and Monaco do not really go together.
No, they don't. 2018 crashed. 2019 crashed. 2021 didn't even start. I skipped 2020 because, well, I'm pretty sure we all know why I didn't mention 2020. But again, a still solid result from Leclerc nonetheless with fourth, and for once finishes the Monaco Grand Prix in his home race, having led 17 laps. Checo led the most laps at 44 out of 64. Race was shortened due to the time limit. Carlos Sainz with P2 after starting in P2 with 3 laps led, and Max Verstappen with P3. A Red Bull 1-3 in this case, though, Dave, in your case, it's Checo, Sainz, Leclerc. But moving on, Leclerc with P4, George Russell with P5, Lando Norris with P6, and fastest lap, the Flying Fernando with P7 after starting in P7. Lewis Hamilton, again after starting in P8, finishes in P8. The lack of overtaking opportunities in Monaco, given how tight and narrow the track is. Valtteri with P9 after starting in 12th, and Sebastian Vettel with P10. 3 drivers did not see the checkered flag in this one. Both Haas cars, Kevin Magnussen with a water pressure issue, and the most infamous one, Mick Schumacher with his shunt at the swimming pool section, which literally split so much so it literally split his car in half.
Yeah, the fact that the car split in half. But another thing I want to mention is when Daniel Ricciardo crashed and McLaren said, "Is the car okay?" And Daniel said, "Yeah, I'm okay," which was pretty heartbreaking to watch.
I feel
So I
like
just want to
McLaren
actually
and Daniel
mention
Ricciardo
that.
just did not mix. Like the chemistry just wasn't there regarding
It
Ricciardo
was there for
and
a couple
McLaren.
months, but you know,
Well, in some cases, like Australia, but most of the time, the consistency just wasn't there regarding Ricciardo and McLaren. It just wasn't there. It just didn't come together.
No, I agree.
But what is your take, Dave, on the Mick Schumacher shunt in this race?
He just hit a wet patch right where that swimming pool area is. It was just you know tough to say if that was a. I think that was just. I wouldn't say it was a mistake on Schumacher's part because he just placed it in just a wrong part of the track, and it just bit him and add damages to Haas's total.
And this was one of the reasons why Mick Schumacher was kicked to the curb at season's end. Another spoiler warning. Alex Albon retired from this race as well due to an undertray problem, 48 laps in. Moving on to the next race, which is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku, or simply put, the Baku Grand Prix. Red Bull 1-2, followed by the 2 Mercedes cars. Max Verstappen victorious. Checo with second, and George Russell with P3, with Hamilton in P4, followed by Pierre Gasly in 5th. Sebastian Vettel with his best finish of the year so far with 6th. Fernando Alonso with 7th. Daniel Ricciardo with 8th. Lando Norris with P9, and Esteban Ocon with P10. Those are your point scores. 5 drivers did not see the checkered flag in this one. Lance Stroll had a vibration. Had to pull out because of it. K-Mag, Zhou Guanyu, and Charles Leclerc had an engine problem. And Carlos Sainz had an hydraulics issue. Checo with the fastest lap. And I'm pretty sure when Leclerc had his engine problem, he was in a good, solid points position. Dave, you watched it live, I'm sure. Brandon, did you watch it live, this race?
yeah, I did.
What was going through your mind when Leclerc had an engine problem?
I was thinking, my oh my, how the turntables have turned.
Speechless. I don't know what to say.
And both Ferraris finished dead last, 20th and 19th, after starting in the top 5. Charles Leclerc with the pole position, Carlos Sainz with P4 on the grid. In the end, they got nothing. Finished the race at the back or at the very bottom of the bill. Again, 20th.
I think that's when the trend started
Dead
of Leclerc
last.
getting pole and Verstappen winning the race. That's when the trend started.
Basically.
Mhm.
And Max Verstappen with the dub. Checo with well, Dave, in your case, Checo with the dub. George Russell with P2. Lewis Hamilton with P3. Dave, again, in your case.
I also want to point out that, the 22 season was the first time, well, not first time, but when the FIA and F1 introduced the ground effect regulations.
And the
So,
regulation that's still in use today.
yeah, so if you're like new to F1, this is not the first time for ground effect. This is actually adopted from the 78 Lotus. That was really powerful. But it was too powerful that they had to like ban it.
Exactly. They banned it a year or 2 years after 78, when Mario Andretti won the championship for the Lotus team. Their last championship, by the way, for Lotus.
Yeah, it was what,
1978.
1978, yeah.
Oh, man.
So yeah, this is not the first time for ground effects. It's just the first time with these modern F1 cars.
With today's generation of the Turbo V6 hybrids.
Yes. So saying that, it's hard. It was harder to watch Hamilton's onboard during the race because
it kept
he was bouncing so much. It was actually unbelievable that he managed to finish 4th. So if you saw, like, after the race, he could barely get out of his car because his back hurts so much.
Dave, we even talked about this in the moment. Before the Canadian Grand Prix rolled around, we had a discussion that Hamilton might be sitting out because of how bad his back was hurting.
Yeah, I mean, it hurt me just watching the onboard.
You and me both.
Like, you can just hear the floor. I'm surprised that the plank didn't wear
Same
that much, but still, but you can just hear it just bouncing so much on that long straight.
Dude, you can even hear the pain in Hamilton's voice when he's talking on the radio.
Yeah, he sounded like he couldn't even breathe, like he just got punched.
It's like that scene from Spider-Man 2. I think it's from Spider-Man 2, where I forget who the character was, but the character was saying, my back. They
yeah,
probably back me up on what I'm saying.
Yeah, when he kind of like lost his powers and he tried to, and then he just fell.
It's like that.
Fell on a car and he's like, my back. Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah, pretty much like that. But you can feel Hamilton's pain.
Again, me being a Hamilton fan, it even hurt me seeing that and what Hamilton had to go through. And mind you, Baku with that long straight, that long main straight, especially when you go down the hill after you make that left-hander, you go downhill, make another left-hander, and then what follows is a sweeping section of corners where you go right, left, and then right, and then a little bit to the right, and then you have this long straight. And you're just sitting there suffering as the car keeps porpoising. That's the term, porpoising, as in the car is constantly jumping, bouncing up and down, and it's taking a toll on your back. And you, mind you, you had to do that for 51 laps. for over an hour and a half. Would you two take that chance?
If I'm getting paid 10 million a year, yeah. Yeah, if I'm
I mean,
getting
I will still
paid-
do it. I just have to visit a chiropractor after the race.
You and me both. Because my back would not survive for that long. I mean, I could try, give it a go. But then again, Dave, to your point, I'm taking that same approach, that exact same approach. But again, Dave, in your case, Checo won this one. George Russell P2, Lewis Hamilton P3.
Well, I can. So what was it? When we had, well, we kind of did the endurance race at OVRP. I guess several, a couple of us were experiencing callus because that was a long race. But my hand was so like, yeah, I probably had the most, and it hurts so much. But I went through the pain,
Like, how much pain are we talking about?
like the pain was so much. I couldn't even I couldn't even barely touch the steering wheel. I had to pretty much just use my left hand and kind of support just a little of my right.
God, wasn't this the same endurance race where it was raining too? Or was it a different one?
No, I don't think so. Or was it?
It's been so long. That faded
Yeah.
out of my memory. I do remember one of the races in OVRP, it was raining and Brandon left.
Yeah, but it was kind of like that pain, but it was just in my hand because I know our friend Sam also had that problem, but his wasn't as torn up, but mine was just like I don't know. I'll say like the skin was like I'll say at least 2.5, 3 inches wide that the skin was was off. Yeah, that hurt. Cause there was between it was me or our friend Matt Haas that was going to do the final running. We didn't have a chance anyway, but I said whatever, I'll do it. And I tried my hardest. I passed a few people. But for some reason, you know, the the timing didn't pick those up, so I was 2 places back than what I was supposed to. But I didn't really care. I had to endure the pain, and I just did what I could. So
And you did. And you got a good finish.
yeah,
So you can be happy with
yes,
yourself in that regard.
yes.
And I was happy for you in that regard. And I was happy for you, especially when you got the podium.
Hmm.
It was one of the races in OBOP you got the podium.
Yeah, that was during one of the TKC races.
Which it was. That was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Once again, your top three, Max Verstappen, Checo, and George Russell, though, Dave. In your case, it's Checo, Russell, Hamilton, the top three. On to the next, which is Canada, which again, we all thought, well, you and me both thought that Hamilton might sit out, but turns out he carried on. And Hamilton got P3 in the Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen led for 53 laps from pole position and won with it was a second margin between himself and Carlos Sainz, considering Carlos Sainz finished a second behind Max Verstappen, as Carlos Sainz led for 17 laps out front, and in the end finishes in P2 behind Max Verstappen, and Lewis Hamilton with P3, George Russell with P4, Charles Leclerc with P5, Esteban Ocon with P6, Valtteri Bottas with P7, Ryan Yuzo with 8th, the Flying Fernando with 9th, we'll get to him in a second, and Lance Stroll with P10, another 10th place finish for the Canadian. But hey, it's something considering that this was Lance's home race. Scores a point. As for the other Canadian, Nicholas Latifi, P16. Nearly a minute, well, basically a full minute behind Max Verstappen. 3 drivers did not finish this race, and those 3 drivers were Checo, retired 7 laps in due to a gearbox problem, Mick Schumacher with an engine problem, and Yuki Tsunoda crashed. Carlos Sainz with the fastest lap. But Dave, in your case, Carlos Sainz with the win. Hamilton P2, George Russell P3. But regarding the flying Fernando, though, remember qualifying where it was wet and damp? Fernando somehow in the Alpine, second fastest on the board.
Yes.
Somehow. But unfortunately, did not get a podium finish. And again, finishes in P9. But you were watching qualifying, I'm sure.
Oh,
What
yeah.
was going through your mind when Fernando was starting second on the grid?
I was a little shocked.
Given
Because
how
I
Alpine
didn't
was.
expect that kind of, I wasn't expecting that kind of speed from the Alpine. Of course, we know that that didn't translate to the race, so.
Unfortunately, for Fernando, despite starting second, finishes in P9. But do you remember the last time he started on the front row prior to Canada 2022?
It's probably the last time. I'm probably gonna say that when he was probably with Ferrari.
Yes. Do you remember the race?
Because the race.
I'll give you a hint. It was one of the races he won.
Can't be Spain, is it?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. I'm trying to go back. Nah, Abu Dhabi?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Now you can tell me because I'm gonna guess a whole bunch.
Hockenheim 2012.
Right.
Hockenheim 2012, which he got the pole in and won. His third win of the 2012 season at that stage. But regarding Ferrari, they finished second and fifth in the Canadian Grand Prix in 2022 with, again, Carlos Sainz P2. Well, in your case, Dave, he won it. And Charles Leclerc with P5. But again, Dave, in your case, it's P4. But logically speaking, Max Verstappen dominated, led for 53 laps out of 70 for pole position and won. But what were you saying?
I mean, this was a decent result for both Mercedes. Yeah, I guess they kind of both struggle, but of course Hamilton struggled the most with the porpoising.
As we saw in Baku, and we touched on moments ago. And again, to think that we thought that he might sit out, he drove anyway, finishes third. At a track where he has found a lot of success over the years, recalling how many times he's won at the place. 2007, 2010, 2012, 15, 16, 17, 19. 7 times he's won at the place at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Rate the Canadian Grand Prix of 2022 on a 1 to 20 scale.
On 1 to 20, I would say this was a decent. I'll say probably a 14.5.
Solid, nonetheless.
Yeah. But I mean, there were some excitements, but it was pretty decent. But as always, is more in the mid part that just boring stuff until they do pit stops and all that.
You say boring stuff. I'm thinking of the front runners.
No, it's more the mid pack. So they're the DRS train. it's harder to pass.
Yeah, because everybody's activating the DRS and using the ERS, or in video game terms, the overtake button
Yeah,
simultaneously, and you got that momentum, but everybody else behind you or in front of you is also having the momentum with that DRS and the overtake button. Again, using video game terms,
yeah. I
you're
mean,
still
the
not going to get anywhere.
DRS, yeah, that DRS is pretty much useless because everyone's wing is open, so you're not breaking the toe. Like you're just gonna be in there, but not gaining. You're just staying where you are. Even if you are using ERS, it's not gonna do anything
Still, despite
unless you
the
have
reducing drag, still
right.
it ain't going to get you nowhere.
No.
And again, you add that with the overtake button in use, again, in using video game terms, still, you're not going to get anywhere. And you want to know what the funny part is? They dub these ground effect cars to aid closer racing and more and aid overtaking opportunities.
Yeah.
And yet, well, funny enough, 2022 F1 season in that sense had more overtakes than what 2021 had to offer. So in a sense, it worked. But when you look at some races like Montreal, you may think that it probably did not work. But what about Silverstone? Well, Silverstone, regarding this race in 2022, I think of two things actually, but there's one main thing that I think of. There's one thing. You know what that one thing is?
What's that?
Through goes Hamilton. Reminiscence of when Lewis made that epic overtake on both Leclerc and Perez approaching the last corner. That puts a smile on my face every single time I look at that footage, and at the same time listen to Crofty's reaction to that. That puts a smile on my face every time because of how just brilliant that pass was. And in the
It
end,
was.
Lewis got P3 and set the fastest lap of the race. Carlos Sainz, meanwhile, the second thing that I remember from this race, Carlos Sainz, from pole position, led 27 laps, the most out of anyone in this occasion, and he won. Regarding the standings, he still has plenty of catching up to do because he, at the conclusion of the British Grand Prix, sits fourth in the championship table, 54 points behind Max Verstappen. Well, in your case, Dave, excluding Max Verstappen, he sits third in the case of Carlos Sainz.
Mhm.
A lot of catching up to do in order to catch up to Checo in that sense. Speaking of whom, Checo in this occasion finishes in P2. Well, speaking of Max Verstappen, now I just come to think about this. Max started P2 in this race, but he finishes in 7th place. Would you believe it?
Yeah, I can believe that one.
Do you know why he finished where he did? Do you know why he finished there?
Didn't he have like a problem? Or
He did. If I'm not
yeah.
mistaken, he had a problem with the floor. Well, it wasn't the floor, it was, I think it was some sort of he had something messed up on his car, whether it was the floor, the under tray, or something that hindered Max's progress as far as straight line speed is concerned. Because Max was losing, from what I can remember, he was losing a lot of time on the straights. A lot of time on the straights. Because again, something was messed up on his car. Whether it be the under tray, the floor, or something. Something wasn't right that was messed up with Max's car. Which again, because of that, he had finished in 7th place instead of the usual P1 or P2, was somewhere on the podium. But in this case, again, because of having some sort of mechanical problem or something happening, I forget what it was, but I do know that something was damaged on Max's car, hence why he finished in P7 and just did not have the straight line speed. But he still finished in the points. Another driver that finished in the points for the first time? Well, obviously it wasn't Max's first time, but Mick Schumacher finishes in the, I can't even talk, but Mick Schumacher finishes in the points for the first time with P8 in that sense, after starting from 19th on the grid. And Sebastian Vettel finishes behind Mick Schumacher with 9th place, after starting from 18th on the grid. And Kevin Magnussen with P10, rounding out the points. P4 for Charles Leclerc, P5 for Fernando Alonso, and P6 for Lando Norris. 6 drivers did not finish this race. Alexander Albon was one of them, as he was one of the 3 drivers, in fact, that was involved in that opening lap crash. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Valtteri Bottas had a gearbox problem. Pierre Gasly had a rear wing issue. Esteban Ocon, meanwhile, had a fuel pump problem on lap 37. But regarding that opening lap crash, this is another infamous one that I remember. Dave, want to explain to the listeners what happened?
All right, that was pretty hectic.
Considering how Zhou Guan Yu flipped upside down and the way how he slid upside down, couple of hundred, about a couple yards, and then hit the tire barrier, which made him flip again and then come to rest on his side. But the way how he landed, it was covering up the cockpit. Had it not been for the halo, the results could have been much different, given the crash and the flip Guan Yu Zhou had.
So of course, the cars do their formation lap. Once all lights went out, they just went their way. Yeah, once they got into the turn 1,
all hell broke loose.
Oh yeah. So of course it started with, well, no, not I wouldn't say it started with 1, but whatever happened where Joe and Russell, pretty much that's kind of happened, but it kind of affect others. Like Albon, he had to retire because Vettel locked up and hit him in the rear, and he crashed into the wall. You also see, I think that's Norris and AlphaTauri.
The AlphaTauri would be either Yuki Tsunoda or Pierre Gasly in that sense.
Yes.
Regarding Daniel Ricciardo, though, because if I'm not mistaken, this was where, according to Drive to Survive, from what I can recall from that Netflix series, I believe this was around the time McLaren were doing something behind the scenes. You know what I mean when I say that, right? When they did Danny Rick dirty. When they signed Oscar Piastri for that McLaren seat, leaving Ricciardo out in the cold. Basically, Ricciardo's, Danny Rick was supposed to drive for McLaren up until 2023. But as we know, I'm sure as we all know, that did not happen. Because again, McLaren did him dirty. But regarding Oscar Piastri, though, do you remember the fiasco that happened? That we all thought that he was going to sign for Alpine, but then he dropped the bombshell and said that it wasn't going to happen.
Well, I think we kind of knew that. We kind of saw coming that most likely that Ricardo was not going to be renewed and or possibly just drop.
And sure enough,
Um,
it happened.
well, that. But then we also saw that Alonso, shockingly, he signed with Aston Martin.
Which he did.
So, and we did know that Piastri was the reserve driver for Alpine at the time. So we were all waiting for, them to confirm. But what strange thing was they announced it at a weird time. What was that? I think it was around well, depending where you are. For us it was around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, I believe. But then I think a couple hours after, I forgot what Piastri was doing at the time, but then he came out with the famous tweet that just stunned us all that he was not driving for Alpine for the following year. We kind of expect that he had a drive somewhere else if he said something to that. Sure enough, yeah, of course he went to McLaren.
And the rest is history. His rookie season in the books, won Rookie of the Year, got a couple podiums. So far, it's looking promising for Piastri as of right now. When the whole fiasco happened, when we all thought he was going to go to Alpine, and then he came out with a bombshell that he wasn't, it makes you wonder what goes on within the F1 world and these F1 teams behind closed doors. It makes you think and wonder.
Well, I think that's what DTS tries to show. Drive to Survive.
Which they mentioned that regarding the whole Alpine Piastri fiasco on the Drive to Survive. They mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure they did when it was season 5, which was the 2022 season. Which again, at the conclusion of the British Grand Prix, your top 3, Carlos Sainz for Ferrari, led the most laps from pole position, gets the job done, which was this is Carlos Sainz's first ever win in Formula One. Sergio Perez with P2 in the Red Bull, and Lewis Hamilton with P3, and setting the fastest lap of the race. On to the Austrian Grand Prix now, where we have Charles Leclerc out on top, having led 51 laps led out of 71, leading the most laps. Max Verstappen leading the other 18, and finishes in second, 1.5 seconds behind, separating the two drivers in the top 2. And Lewis Hamilton, P3 in the Mercedes. Hey, something better than nothing in the case of Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, it's not a win, but he still finished on the podium to his credit. And George Russell, his teammate, with P4. And Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, the last car on the lead lap, with P5. Mick Schumacher with the 6th place finish. So for his best ever outing in F1 at this point in his career, with 6th place for the German, the son of Michael Schumacher. Lando Norris with P7. Kevin Magnussen with P8. Daniel Ricciardo with P9, and Fernando Alonso with P10. 3 drivers did not see the checkered flag in this one. Those drivers were Sergio Perez, Nicholas Latifi, and Carlos Sainz. Max Verstappen with the fastest lap of the race, and still leads comfortably in the championship table, 38 point at this stage, at the conclusion of the Austrian Grand Prix, 38 points ahead of Charles Leclerc, 57 ahead of Checo, and 75 ahead of Carlos Sainz. So at this stage, Leclerc still has a shot. Perez still has a shot, even though it's kind of fading out from Perez, but he still, at this stage, still has a chance. Charles Leclerc, same for him.
I mean, it was a great battle with Leclerc and Max. Again, decent result for Mercedes. Hamilton getting that P3. Alonso P10 is another. I think that was the best result he can do. Yeah, kind of sorry for Perez and Sainz. But yeah, I mean, this was I guess one of the races that were like very exciting.
Especially with the battle that Leclerc and Max put on for the fans, though, both at the track and for those watching at home or somewhere on the television screen on their mobile devices.
Yes.
Again, Charles Leclerc, as I mentioned before, came out on top, 1.5 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. But in the sprint, it was the other way around. It was vice versa. Max with the dub, Leclerc P2. Again, in the sprint, it was Max with the win, Charles Leclerc with P2. But in the race, again, vice versa. Leclerc with the win, and Max with P2. And Lewis Hamilton, again, with third place to join the podium party. Again, considering Lewis finishes in third. Still, solid result from Mercedes, but they still have a lot of catching up to do in both the Constructors'
Yes.
Championship and especially the Drivers' Championship, which, speaking of the Drivers' Championship, at this stage, George Russell going from 4th to 5th, and Lewis is still in P6. Ahead of Norris, but again, Lewis is still in P6 at this stage. But Russell going from 4th at one point to now drops back to 5th. The points, as far as that is concerned, the points difference between the two Mercedes drivers. Again, up to this point, George Russell, 128 points. Compare that to Lewis's score of 109. Again, up to this point. As we move on to the next race, which the next race is the French Grand Prix. Oh boy. Dave, can we first and foremost talk about that Charles Leclerc moment?
Well, how about we'll get to that. How about we just start from the start of the race, and we'll work towards that. So Leclerc, he did have he had a solid start. Of course, there was a little hectic contact between I think it was Ocon and Ricardo. I mean that it was a tight left-hander that really there was really no room for Ricardo. I mean, let's just say Leclerc he had a I guess a decent lead, but yeah, he just took that let's just say he just took too much speed into that corner, and yeah, he just took himself out. I mean, if that didn't happen, I mean, I think it would still probably be tough for him to win, but I mean, we can't really say if that was the case if he didn't crash.
In the end, he couldn't find throttle and spun off and crashed. costing himself a full house of points.
Yeah.
A good score of points.
Oh, I mean,
But at least Ferrari still scored points with Carlos Sainz's 5th place finish. So at least we have that. But still, a podium finish, let alone a race win, was on the cards for Leclerc. But then that crash happened. And again, because of that, a chance of scoring a good chunk of points, all that hard work wasted. But Carlos Sainz not only scored 5th place, he set the fastest lap of the race, scoring that extra point. So instead of 10 points, he gets 11 points. There is a rule in place since 2019 with this point system since 2010. Since 2019, though, whoever gets fastest lap, and if you finish in the points, you get that extra point. And Carlos Sainz did just that with the fastest lap of the race in this edition of the French Grand Prix. And we're going to the French drivers in this case. Esteban Ocon with P8, Pierre Gasly with P12. But your top 10, Max Verstappen, having led 35 laps out front, 35 out of 53. Lewis Hamilton with P2. George Russell with P3. I was watching this with a friend of mine live when it was happening with a few laps to go. We saw the gap. Looking at the gap and thinking back, we thought that Max had it in the bag and Lewis had no chance. And we were right. Lewis and Max, the gap between them at the checkered flag, 10.5 seconds. But hey, we still got a podium finish of 2nd place, so I'm at least happy and satisfied with that. And both Mercedes cars actually in the podium, with George Russell with P3. Sergio Perez with P4, so nothing but Mercedes and Red Bull in the Mercedes and Red Bull in the top 4. Again, Carlos Sainz, as I mentioned before, with P5. Fernando Alonso, the other Spaniard, in P6. Lando Norris in P7. Esteban Ocon, as I mentioned before, finishes 8th. Daniel Ricciardo with 9th. And Lance Stroll, once again, 10th place, finishing ahead of Seb. On to the Hungarian Grand Prix then, for round 13 in the championship, with less than 10 races to go now at this stage in the championship. And the top 3 was basically the same as it was in the French Grand Prix. Max Verstappen with the dub, Lewis Hamilton with P2, this time 8 seconds off to Max Verstappen at the checkered flag. And George Russell with P3, Carlos Sainz moving 1 position further with P4 instead of P5. Basically, the position between Sainz and Checo flip-flopped. Instead of Sainz finishing 5th, it's P4. And instead of Checo finishing in P4, he got P5 in this case, after starting from 11th on the board, on the grid. Charles Leclerc with P6, probably could have been higher than that, but I'll get to that later. Lando Norris with P7. Fernando Alonso with P8. Esteban Ocon, P9. And Sebastian Vettel with P10. Valtteri Bottas went out with a fuel ejection problem. Therefore, had to retire the car. 65 laps in, just 5 laps short from the finish. Gutting for Valtteri in that case. And Lewis with the fastest lap of the race. Lewis Hamilton with the fastest lap and 2nd place finish. But still, has a lot of catching up to do. But at this stage, the championship was out of the cards. Max Verstappen from 10th on the grid, and even spinning out at one point, still won. And would you believe it, George Russell led the most laps in this case. 24 laps led out front. Max Verstappen leading the second most of 20. Part of the reason why George Russell not only had the racecraft and race pace, he won the pole position.
I was glad that at least someone got pole position. other than Max.
And in this case, it's George Russell from Mercedes. Hey, some from Mercedes to cheer about. At least we're going the pole.
I mean, that's
We're going the
one
pole
part,
position
but
side of things, at least. But one
I
thing
mean,
yet to
that's
get at this stage, a race win. However, do you remember the battle between Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon?
yes.
The battle between the Alpines of Fernando and Esteban, it was so close and so tight to the point Fernando wasn't too, well, he wasn't too slow to to talk on the radio, because given how close and tight they were between the two Alpines, Fernando was quick to have his comments on what he said regarding Esteban on the radio. I forget word from word on what he said, but I do know and remember that Fernando had things to say regarding Esteban that never had he raced against a teammate this overly aggressive. But in this case, though, Fernando did in the end get the better of Esteban regardless. P8 for the Spaniard, and for the Frenchman of Esteban Ocon, he finishes P9. And Seb behind the two in P10. Now, regarding Sebastian, up to this point, Sebastian Vettel was not on any form of social media. But then, when we get to the Hungaroring, whether it was practice or qualifying, but I do know when Hungarian Grand Prix weekend rolled around, he got on social media for the first time. And that's where, on Instagram, he posted a video
that he announced his retirement.
What was going through your mind when you saw that video?
Well, one, I was surprised to like that Vettel was actually on social media because he's the type of person that doesn't really use social media. But then you see the video, and I mean that's just again a shock that that's how he announces his retirement.
Get on social media, and that's the reason why he got on social media in the first place at the time, because of that. And at that point, we all thought this was the swan song season for Sebastian Vettel. At this stage, after the Hungarian Grand Prix, Sebastian sits P13 in the championship table with a score of 16 points, but is ahead of his teammate Lance Stroll, who has 4 points to his credit and is 18th in the standings. Shocker, not really. And speaking of Lance Stroll, he finishes in P11 in the Hungarian Grand Prix behind his teammate Seb, albeit a lap down. Well, Sebastian also finished a lap down, but still, Lance did not get the better of Sebastian. In other words, he did not finish ahead of Vettel in this case. But your top three, again, with Lewis setting the fastest lap of the race, your top three, Max Verstappen for Red Bull, Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes, and George Russell with P3. Again, Russell with the most laps led, but couldn't seal the deal, finishing in third. Max Verstappen leading the second most laps, and again, having spun out at one point, still won. Well, Dave, in your case, Dave, Lewis Hamilton won, George Russell second, and Carlos Sainz third. Again, Dave, in your case. So really, that's back-to-back wins. French Grand Prix and the Hungarian Grand Prix. Hamilton, Russell, and Checo. Again, regarding the French Grand Prix, and here the Hungarian Grand Prix, Hamilton, Russell, Sainz. Again, Dave, in your eyes, excluding Max Verstappen. We come to the Belgian Grand Prix then, where it is here the crash happened. Dave, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, the Belgian Grand Prix.
Yes.
Of course, you're talking about, well, of course, the opening lap between Alonso and Hamilton.
And Fernando was quick to call out Hamilton on the radio, saying he hit me, what an idiot. And even had the audacity to say, this guy knows how to start a race when he's starting first. The contact between Hamilton and Fernando, even though it was light, it was enough to send Lewis up in the air for a split second and then come crashing right back down to earth. And when he come crashing right back, and when he came crashing right back down to earth, the damage was terminal, and had to pull out, had to retire the car. Same for Valtteri as well, because he also got into a tangle with someone, retired one lap later. So not a race to forget. A race to forget for both Lewis and Valtteri, ex-teammates. Because again, Valtteri first season with the Alfa Romeo outfit. Up front, guess who won it?
We know.
Because after starting 14th on the grid, Max still won. And still led the most laps. And still got the fastest lap in. Set the fastest lap of the race in that sense, in other words. Red Bull 1-2 finish. Max Verstappen with the dub. Checo with P2. Carlos Sainz with P3 for Ferrari, having led just 12 laps out front. Checo leading just one lap, but still got a podium with second place. And Max, as I said, again, with the dub, again, mind you, started from 14th on the grid, still won, and still led the most laps. As far as the rest of the point scorers, George Russell with P4. Fernando Alonso, despite the contact he had with Lewis Hamilton, finishes in P5. Charles Leclerc with P6. Esteban Ocon with P7. Sebastian Vettel with P8. Pierre Gasly with P9. And Alex Albon with P10 in the Williams. Well, Dave, in your case, it's Checo, Sainz, Russell, your top three. And only 3 drivers fell a lap down. And those 3 drivers were the two Haas drivers of Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher. And Nicholas Latifi was also among those, as all 3 finished at the bottom of the barrel. On to the next one, which is the Dutch Grand Prix. You can take a guess who won that one.
Yeah.
You know, don't you?
Yep.
Max Verstappen. George Russell with P2. And Charles Leclerc with P3. And Max Verstappen in his home Grand Prix. Well, technically second home Grand Prix since he is from Belgium, or was born in Belgium, which he won that one, and also wins the Dutch Grand Prix. But again, your top 3, Max Verstappen, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton with P4, Checo with P5, Fernando with P6, Lando with P7, Carlos Sainz with 8th, Esteban Ocon with P9, and Lance Stroll with P10. Yet another 10th place finish for him. And only 2 drivers did not finish, and both of those drivers with mechanical problems. Valtteri Bottas with a power unit problem, and Yuki Tsunoda with a differential problem. Max Verstappen with the fastest lap of the race. No surprise. And also no surprise, won the race from pole and led the most laps. 58 out of 72. Lewis Hamilton was another who led out front, and those laps he led were 14 in total for Lewis Hamilton in this race. I believe this was the race where Mercedes played an interesting strategy tactic to benefit, if I'm not mistaken, to benefit George Russell. I could be wrong when I say that, but this was also where they almost crashed down the main straight, given how hard they were racing, the 2 Mercedes drivers. But in the end, kept it clean and still finished in the points regardless. With again, George Russell with P2, Lewis Hamilton with P4. But still, both have a lot of catching up to do, and both, well, George Russell moves back up to 4th in the championship, now with a score of 188 points at this stage. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, with 158 points after the conclusion of the Dutch Grand Prix.
I mean, there were exciting points. You know, like the one battle, Checo and Hamilton. Well, there was also a little drama in the pit lane. Of course, Checo, he kind of ran over one of the teams. I think it was Ferrari's wheel gun.
Yes,
Signs he had a problem.
pit stop error for Carlos Sainz.
I mean, can't really be surprised at this point with Ferrari.
And speaking of, we forgot to
Um,
mention this at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Ferrari put Charles Leclerc, and I think Carlos Sainz too, on the hard compound tire.
I mean, we kind of touched this before about the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Of 2022
How
when they put them on the hard compound tire when they knew it was the slowest compound, because the mediums and the softs were the way to go.
yeah, I mean that was the dumbest decision that I don't know whose call that was. I don't. They were just completely stupid.
Matteo Binotto planned that. That's probably one of the reasons why That's probably one of the reasons why Binotto lost his job as team principal in the first place at the conclusion of the year.
Oh, I was surprised that he was still there. They should have at least put Bernardo back where he was in the technical department.
Which he was there during the Schumacher days, too. Yeah, during the Schumacher days, when Schumacher was winning all those championships for Ferrari from 2000 through 2004. Binotto was there on the technical side. Yes, he was. But in 2019, he became the team principal. And from that point on, 2020, 2021, and 2022, it didn't work out.
Yeah, well, of course it didn't work. I mean, again, he's technical. He's not someone that should be a team principal.
Yet they still did that. They made that decision, and look where it got them.
Yeah, but I think for once Ferrari made a right decision. Well, it's too early for now. But with Fred Vasseur, he's doing a pretty good job at the moment. They still have a little hiccups, but that's usual. But so far he's doing pretty decent.
I agree. Slow but steady progress, as the way things stand right now. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Frederic Vasseur in 2022 was with the Alfa Romeo team.
Correct. He was a team principal there.
Now he's with Ferrari since 2023.
Correct.
And speaking of, we go to Ferrari's home territory, Monza. Well, Imola is also another one, but Monza is another one too. Unfortunately, Ferrari did not win their home Grand Prix. They finished 2nd and 4th, respectively. Charles Leclerc with P2, Carlos Sainz with P4, George Russell with P3, Max Verstappen, no surprise, finishes P1 after starting from 7th on the grid and led the most laps, but did not get the fastest lap, as that honor goes to Checo Perez, who finishes in P6, Lewis Hamilton with P5, Lando Norris with P7, Pierre Gasly with P8, Nick de Vries with P9. I say Nick de Vries because he was driving Alex Albon's car, Nick de Vries.
Yes, he was. He came down with appendicitis.
Much like what Carlos Sainz went through recently at Saudi.
Yes.
And with Nick de Vries with the 9th place finish, scoring 2 points, This was part of the reason, if not the main reason, why AlphaTauri signed him on for the following season in 2023, which we went over in the 2023 recap on how mediocre Nick DeVries was in his rookie campaign.
Well, like you know how we talked about like Logan Sargent. I can't really blame the driver. It's the you know the machine that they give you, and you know that AlphaTauri was like almost straight garbage.
Which it was.
So yeah, I mean, again, you couldn't really blame the driver. I mean, one, I think it wasn't like it wasn't set up the way he wants it to, and it was yeah, it just wasn't working for him.
And unfortunately, after 10 races, again, we touched on this in the F1 2023 recap. After 10 races, Nick DeVries booted, kicked out, kicked to the curb.
I mean, you know, we said this before. That's kind of harsh. I mean, to drop a driver midway. I mean, I know he wasn't performing as what they expected, but at least he wasn't like damaging the car, you know, like other drivers are.
Like Logan Sargent, for example.
That, but also like, you know, Mick Schumacher.
Especially in
'Cause, you know,
Monaco
he's
when
back.
Schumacher crashed
Uh,
and got split in half.
That and in Jeddah.
His qualifying
Those
run.
were the two. Yeah, but those were the two biggest. But I mean, you can say that that's how F1 does it. You know, to drop a driver, but of course, Hamilton had to take a stab at it and he said, no, that's pretty much how Red Bull does it.
Well, former
Because we've seen that in the past, you know, with Kvyat when he was you know, at Red Bull. Of course, I think uh a few incidents, you know, he was a torpedo in China, but I think the real nail in the coffin was probably his two contacts with Vettel and Sochi.
in 2016
Yes.
on the opening lap too.
Yeah.
So that's an even worse a look in that sense on the opening lap. Well, then again, on the opening lap, cars and drivers are very bunched up and close together. But
like you can excuse like the first contact because you know turn one. Well, not turn one, but yeah, you can say turn one. No, it's more like turn two because turn one is more just like a little kink, but still more the straight. You can excuse that because you know everyone's going there. Lockups are most likely going to happen. So, but that second one, there's no words there because he just like just pushed the battle right into the wall.
and
He
I put,
rear-ended him.
and I put Vettel out of the race, out of the running, just like that.
Yep.
Just like
Yep.
that. You know, on that day, Nico Rosberg won it. Pretty sure he set the Grand Slam too, if I'm not mistaken. Sochi Grand Prix 2016, Nico Rosberg did set the Grand Slam. Pole position, fastest lap, led every single lap, walked off with the dub. Of course, more on that when we get to the 2016 side of things, when we recap the 2016 season, whenever that will be. But we're going to the 2022 season, we're going to the Italian Grand Prix. Former Red Bull driver, Sebastian Vettel, and former Ferrari driver, finishes dead last in his final Italian Grand Prix. And that was because on lap 10, power unit issue. Fernando Alonso was also among those on the sidelines with a water pressure problem.
Mm-hmm.
Lance Stroll withdrew on lap 39, and Daniel Ricciardo had a power unit problem as well, 45 laps in. Less than 10 laps to go from the finish. And the race, if I'm not mistaken, ended under the safety car, which should have happened in Abu Dhabi of 2021. But at this point, it is what it is. But your
Yeah.
top three again, Max Verstappen with the dub, leading the most laps of 34 out of 53. Max Verstappen with the dub. Charles Leclerc with P2, 19 laps led out front for him. And George Russell with P3. Well, Dave, in your case, Ferrari did score a win in their home race with Charles Leclerc coming out on top. From the pole position, too. George Russell with P2 and Carlos Sainz P3. So, Dave, in your eyes, it's a Ferrari 1-3. Lewis
Yes.
Hamilton with P4. And Checo with the fastest lap.
Not that much excitement. You know, I mean, it's the pretty much like the fastest track on the calendar. So I wouldn't. Well, at least it wasn't like a total blowout for Max because the player was only 2.5 seconds behind. The Ferrari didn't have that top speed, so
Because
I
again,
think
Ferrari
yeah
had the advantage in the corners. Red Bull had the
yeah.
advantage on the straights. Hence why you say what you said.
Yep.
And with Monza, you had that long straight on the main straight, and another long straight after. Despite that, you have that slight left kink right after you make that right-hander coming out of the second Lesmo. You have that other long straight again. Aside from
Yeah,
that
you have
right
the
left kink,
yeah,
that
you
you
have
take
the longer straight
coming out
right
of
at
a
the
Star
start
chicane,
finish line, and then the shorter one just after the Ascari chicane.
which arguably people say that should be a DRS zone. And to an extent, I
Uh
have to agree.
yeah, I mean the street should be that's the second one it should be.
And to an extent, I have to agree, considering you have that it may not be as long as the main straight, but it's still long enough to provide a DRS zone coming out of the Ascari
And
chicane.
unless you're like Ricardo, you do have to brake just a little late going into the final turn. So hopefully, the rear wing does close, so you don't, go into the gravel.
As Leclerc found out in the 2020 edition of the race, but he went wide, but I think he had a mechanical problem in the 2020 edition of the Italian Grand Prix.
Yes.
I figured as much. Same for Seb, but Seb had a brake problem in that race.
Yes.
Ferrari in general were just all over the place, but for the wrong reasons in 2020. Oh, we'll get to that when we touch on the 2020 season recap. Moving on to round 18 in the championship, center stage at the Singapore Grand Prix under the lights in Marina Bay. George Russell with the fastest lap time, with the fastest lap of the race, in other words. In the end, George crashed. Oh, wait, no, he didn't crash out. But Yuki Tsunoda did. Same for Alex Albon, as well as Nicholas Latifi. Ooh, shocker. And Zhou Guan Yu. Unfortunately for George, couldn't get it together and finishes 2 laps down in 14th place after starting from 11th on the grid. His teammate, meanwhile, finished in P9 after starting from the 3rd place spot on the grid. But again, not bad, but not great. Because again, this is Lewis Hamilton we're talking about here. You expect better from him. In other words, you expect him to finish on the podium or even win the damn thing, which that honor went to Checo, having led every single lap in this race. 59 out of 59. Charles Leclerc with P2 and Carlos Sainz with P3. signs who were going to win the following year in Singapore. Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo with 4th and 5th, respectively, the two McLarens. Lance Stroll with 6th place. Max Verstappen, much like in Silverstone, P7. Followed by Sebastian Vettel with P8 after starting from 14th on the grid. Again, Lewis Hamilton, as I mentioned before, with P9. And Pierre Gasly with P10, rounding out the points. Now, this was the race. This was the weekend where, given how many points Max was able to score throughout the course of the 2022 season, it was here in Singapore. If he won the race, either he won the race or finished second, but if he either finished second or won the race, especially won the race, Max would have been the champion right then and there. But again, considering that went to Checo and Max finished in P7, Max wasn't crowned champion just yet at this point. Which, speaking of, the points gap between Max Verstappen and second place Charles Leclerc in the standings, the points difference, 104. The points difference between Max Verstappen and second place Charles Leclerc, 104 points after the Singapore Grand Prix. Dave, in your case, it's a 2 points difference regarding Leclerc and Perez. Because Leclerc at the stage with 237 points, Checo with 235 points. So again, excluding Max, the championship between Leclerc and Perez is nip and tuck at this stage. But your thoughts on the Singapore Grand Prix from 2022?
I mean, Singapore usually shows excitement and battles, but also Singapore is by far like the toughest race on the F1 calendar. So this, since it debuted back in
8.
2009.
8.
Or I'm sorry, 2008. Sorry. It has always been a night race, which is really nice. But just because it's at night doesn't mean it doesn't get away from the hot temperatures. It is very humid at Singapore. That combined being in an F1 car Singapore is known for being pretty much the only race that goes over the 2-hour limit mark.
Which
Plus,
in this case,
there's the occasional safety car. So the safety car rate is usually about like 90 to 100%. But this race, they started, the track was wet. So
it was.
now you're just adding another element of difficulty.
That's probably one of the reasons why Russell finished at the bottom of the barrel. I think he got caught out in the wet and either got into something or someone, hence why he finished where he finished, which is again P14. And you said the safety car is 9 times out of 10 likely to happen. Well, in this case, P2 edition, the safety car, from what I'm seeing on Racing Reference, came out 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what I'm seeing is 4 cautions, basically.
Yeah.
But either way, the safety car was deployed in this race. So, Dave, to your point, the safety car did indeed come out in this edition of the Singapore Grand Prix from 2022. But let me ask you this. When Checo won, what was your reaction?
I was glad to see Perez gain a win. I guess this pretty much why they were calling Perez like the king of the streets.
Given his wins at this point,
but it was
on the street circuits minus Bahrain or let me say this the right way. Sakir in 2020. But to your point, 98% of his wins were on the street tracks. Baku 2021, Monaco 2022, and now Singapore 2022, almost at 2023. But to your point, at this stage, his wins were mostly on the street circuits. Again, Baku 2021, Monaco 2022, and Singapore 2022. Not counting his first career win because Bahrain is a permanent racing facility. Sakir, saying that the right way, but realistically speaking, it's Bahrain. It's the Bahrain circuit because the pair is won there either way. Bahrain, Sakir, same thing. And again, George Russell, despite finishing at the bottom of the barrel, sets the fastest lap of the race in the Singapore Grand Prix. But your top three again, Checo with the dub for Red Bull, followed by the two Ferraris, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. And again, Checo leading every single lap after starting second on the grid. Leclerc with another pole position, but just could not get that win. But at the end of the day, Ferrari satisfied with second and third, respectively. A podium finish nonetheless, with both of their Ferrari F175 chassis second and third, respectively. Again, Leclerc P2, Sainz P3. All right, on to the next one, which is Japan. Another wet and damp race on the schedule. Do you remember the start?
I believe so.
When Carlos Sainz crashed
Yes.
and they brought out the truck or the tractor, and Pierre Gasly went by it, and he had things to say about that.
So, the visibility in Suzuka was very difficult with the amount of spray. So, I guess, yeah, they had yellow flags, but the drivers couldn't really see like tractors or cars like off the track. So it was pretty much dangerous. So there was, I think, one point, like Pierre Gasly hit one of the barriers and pretty much took the sign with him.
Which he did.
Hey, he got an extra wing.
That's true. That is true. But in the end, did it help him give him that extra downforce?
No.
No, it did not. Because in the end, despite that extra wing and that, you could say, extra downforce, it didn't do much. Why? Gasly finished P18 after starting dead last. Finishes P18. His teammate, on the other hand, Yuki Tsunoda, 13th after starting in 13th. And Yuki in his home Grand Prix. Even though it's out of the points range, I can imagine how the Japanese fans reacted when Yuki finished the race. And even though, again, it wasn't a points finish, but he still finished the Grand Prix. But just imagine how the reaction would be when he won, when he won, that's another can of worms, but when he got on the podium, reminiscent of when Kamui Kobayashi got on the podium in the 2012 edition of this race.
Oh, I'm pretty sure the Japanese crowd was ecstatic for Kobayashi.
Which they were.
Oh yeah. I mean that was Kobayashi deserved that.
He did. He really did. His only podium in F1, by the way. Japan 2012.
Yeah.
And to date, Sauber's latest podium. Would you believe it? And Dave, you were watching that race live, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I think that was 2012. I think that's because that was Perez was still teammates with him.
Yes, he was. The second year in
because
Formula
the following he would be signed with McLaren. So yeah.
Yep, replacing Hamilton when Hamilton went to Mercedes. and McLaren
But
had
you
a
can,
spot open, and Checo took that
but
chance.
you can clearly see that why McLaren signed Perez, because he was actually driving really good
Because he
in
showed
2012.
potential in the Sauber. Even in
Oh yeah.
2011, he showed potential to a degree.
Well, especially that I think that was 2012 when he was battling with Alonso in Malaysia.
Yes, he was. Funny enough, I actually watched the full race live a few days ago. Funny enough, now that you bring that up. Had Checo not went wide at the penultimate turn, Checo probably could have won the 2012 Malaysian Grand Prix.
He
I
could have.
mean, oh, so you agree with me?
Yeah. I mean, he had it, but
Dude, he
once
was
the
even closing
driver
in on
make that
Alonso.
slight mistake, I mean, that's just it's tough to recover depending on how many laps are left.
There were
But then,
there
you
was
also
7
have
laps to go when Checo went off.
with that little margin, and especially having a world champion like Alonso behind you, that adds a little more pressure.
Well, when you have a world champion, a 2-time world champion in Alonso's case, because Alonso a 2-time Formula One world champion, you have that right in front of you, and you have a shot to overtake a 2-time Formula One world champion. You close it in, you set the fastest lap, you close it in, gaining, knowing that you have a shot, and then you throw it away by going wide. Dave, I don't know about you, but I would be kicking myself in the foot for that if that was me. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, if only you didn't have that one mistake.
Exactly. One mistake can make a difference between victory and defeat.
Yes.
And in this case, with Checo in Malaysia 2012, it was bitter defeat. But he was still satisfied with second place nonetheless. But on Radio Rewind, you could tell, based on what he said, he wanted to win the race so bad, given what he said post race on Radio Rewind, Malaysia 2012. Even during the race coverage too. I think they played the radio from Checo's end not too long after they crossed the line on the race coverage in Malaysia 2012. But speaking of Checo, he finished the 2022 edition of the Japanese Grand Prix runner-up to Max Verstappen. Well, in your case, won the race. Max Verstappen with the win, having led 27 of the 28 laps out front. Checo with P2, another Red Bull 1-2 finish, and Charles Leclerc with P3. Esteban Ocon with P4, Lewis Hamilton with P5, Sebastian Vettel with P6, Fernando Alonso with P7, with Seb just edging out Fernando at the line in the final seconds. George Russell with P8, Nicholas Latifi, would you believe it, finished in P9, having started from 19th on the grid slot. Would you believe that? Nicholas Latifi, 9th place finish in the points. In damp, tricky, wet conditions, too. And rounding out the top 10 is Lando Norris in the McLaren with 10th place after starting from 10th place, getting the better of Daniel Ricciardo. Guan Yu Zhou set the fastest lap of the race. Would you believe it?
Guan Yu Zhou, he got the fastest lap, but of course, if you're outside the top 10, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly, because again, like I said earlier, if you finish in the points, you get the fastest lap. But again, you finish in the points in that scenario, you get that extra point. Even if you set the fastest lap, but when you set the fastest lap outside of the points, however, you don't get that extra point. You have to finish in the points to get that extra point in order for that to count. But still, Guan Yu Zhou with the fastest lap, hats off to him. Mind you, Juan Yu Zhou is a rookie at this time. But regarding Seb and Fernando, that battle that they had in the final laps,
I mean, that was a hell of a battle.
especially coming to the line. And if we go further up the field, regarding Checo and Leclerc, the finish with Checo and Leclerc, with the official results saying that it's Checo with second and Leclerc. Checo second and Leclerc P3. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I'm pretty sure it was the other way around when they came to the line with Leclerc in P2, Checo P3. But because Leclerc
Yes.
overtook Checo cutting the chicane, that last chicane, he got a time penalty for that. Hence
Right.
why he got demoted to third.
Yes.
I figured as much. Max was, well, in your case, Dave, Checo won it. It's Checo that won, Leclerc P2, and Esteban Ocon P3. In your case. But realistically speaking, with Max Verstappen's win, this was enough to officially claim the Drivers' Championship. As in other words, Max Verstappen, at the conclusion of the Japanese Grand Prix, was crowned as the 2022 Formula One World Champion. Dave, you're probably rolling your eyes or covering your ears as I say that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to say that. Sorry about that. And the gap, 113 points between Max and Checo. As Checo now is in second place, overtaking Leclerc for that second place spot in the standings. Well, Dave, in your case, it's for the lead, excluding Max. Seriously though, the battle between Seb and Fernando, Dave, I'm sure reminiscent of the early 2010s when they were battling for race wins and championships, it brought you back to those days, didn't it?
Yes.
Just like the good old days and the good old times. And would you believe it? Fernando led a lap in the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix, but in the end finishes seventh. Well, in your case, finishes sixth. Again, excluding Max. And then Dave, in your eyes, the championship is still on with Checo and Leclerc. Maybe George Russell can get in the mix as well and make some noise. Which, speaking of, George Russell at the end of the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix finishes eighth. Well, in your case, finishes in P7. And the fastest lap of the race, once again, Juan Yu Zhou. Your top three again, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Red Bull 1-2 finish, followed by the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. That's your top three again, but Dave, in your eyes, your top three, Sergio Perez for Red Bull, Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, Esteban Ocon for Alpine. On to round 20 then, which is in Texas. You can take a guess who won it.
Yeah. But of course, there was a bit of drama right at the start.
With Carlos Sainz and George Russell getting into it.
Yes. Because of course, Carlos Sainz actually got pole.
Which he did. But even when he got the pole, he went from first to last. Just like that.
Yeah. Oh, because Russell just pinned Carlos Sainz around.
And that was enough to do damage to his car to the point where the damage was terminal and had to retire the car. Mind you, first corner, first lap. In other words, this happened on the opening lap.
And I'm pretty sure Russell got penalized for that collision.
Oh, no doubt. But even so, George got the fastest lap of the race and finishes fifth. Well, your case finishes fourth. You know who won it? Excluding Max, by the way. You ready? You remember who won?
Hamilton.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Leclerc P2, Checo P3. Though, for those out there who are logically speaking, Max won it, having led 40 laps out front out of the 56 laps run. Max Verstappen victorious, again. Lewis Hamilton P2, Charles Leclerc P3. Checo with P4, George Russell P5, and the purple fast lap time for good measure. Lando Norris with P6, Sebastian Vettel with P7, yet another close battle in the final laps, but this time with Kevin Magnussen. As Kevin Magnussen finishes P8, Yuki Tsunoda with P9, after starting from 19th on the grid, and Esteban Ocon with P10, rounding out the points. Aside from Carlos Sainz to not finish, I can't even talk today, was Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll. Now, there was a reason for that regarding Lance. Do you remember Lance and Fernando getting into it on the backstretch?
Yes.
That's why Lance was out of the race, because Fernando hit Lance's rear so much so not only Fernando got airborne, but luckily was able to land on all fours, but it did damage to Lance's rear wing. Hence, the damage was terminal and had to retire the car. But Fernando kept going. And in the case of Fernando Alonso, he finishes 15th.
And of course, oddly enough, they will be teammates.
Coincidentally enough, as we talked about in the 2023 recap. As we look at the standings now, the gap between Leclerc and Perez is pretty tight. 267 points for Leclerc, 265 for Checo. The gap, 2 points. George Russell's point score of 218 points. Because, again, maybe George can get in the mix and make some noise if he keeps up the consistency. He got 5th place in the Texas Grand Prix, but the question is he able to keep up this momentum with 3 more races left to go? And with Max's win in this Texas Grand Prix, Red Bull sealed the Constructors' Championship. So not only was the Drivers' Championship wrapped up, which was in Japan, here in Texas, the Constructors was now sealed in the bag for Red Bull. Their first Constructors' Championship in 9 years. 2013 was their last one prior to 2022. 2013 was their last one. Again, prior to Texas 2022. I believe, funny enough, 2013 at Texas, when Seb won that one, I believe Red Bull won the Constructors in Texas 2013 as well. Funny enough. Seb won, at that point, 8 in a row. 8 wins in a row. And on the radio, he said, and I quote, "We have to remember these days. We have to remember these days. Because there is no guarantee that they'll last forever. Enjoy them as long as they last." And speaking of, Seb, in the 2022 edition of the Texas Grand Prix, finishes 7th. Again, much like in Japan, when he battled Fernando in the final laps, he battled K-Mag in the final laps and got the better of K-Mag. Seb with P7 and K-Mag with P8. K-Mag still bagged in 4 points for the Haas F1 team, so there's that. As his teammate Mick Schumacher, Mick finished at the bottom, P14 for the German. Your top 3, again, at the conclusion of the 2022 Texas Grand Prix. Max Verstappen with the win, having led 40 laps out front out of the 56 lap race distance. Lewis Hamilton with P2, having led for 9 laps, and Charles Leclerc with P3. Now, Lewis, I had a friend of mine, I think me, you, and my friend Bryce touched on this in the last recording we were on. After the final round of pit stops, when Lewis was able to build that gap, we thought that Lewis, logically speaking, had a legitimate shot at the race win. But then Max kept closing in, and then passed him and won. The gap between those two, regarding Lewis and Max, the gap was 5 seconds. That straight line speed that Red Bull, I swear, that Red Bull RB18 with that straight line speed, too OP. It's too overpowered, leaving Mercedes scratching their heads. But even so, Mercedes still got a good haul of points. Again, with Lewis, P2, and George Russell, P5 at the end of the day. So still all in a day's work. And George Russell getting that extra point with the fastest lap of the race. So for the Mexican Grand Prix, we have Max Verstappen with the dub, having led 61 laps out front out of the 71 lap race distance. And much like in Hungary, Paul Ricard, aka the French Grand Prix, and the Texas Grand Prix, Lewis, P2, behind the Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman at this point. And Checo, P3. A Red Bull 1-3 at the end of the day. George Russell with P4, Carlos Sainz P5, Charles Leclerc with P6, Daniel Ricciardo P7, Esteban Ocon with P8, Lando Norris with P9, and Valtteri Bottas with P10. 2 drivers did not see the checkered flag in this one. Fernando Alonso was one of them with a power unit problem, and Yuki Tsunoda crashed. And much like the Texas Grand Prix, George Russell set the fastest lap time in the race. Still sits 4th in the championship. Well, if you exclude Max Verstappen, sits 3rd place in the championship, behind Leclerc and Checo. But it's still a close game between Checo, Leclerc, and Russell, mainly Perez and Leclerc, heading into the last 2 rounds in the 2022 Formula One season. But at the end of the day, no one's catching Max Verstappen because, well, walked off with another dub. Your top 3 again. Max Verstappen with the win, Lewis Hamilton P2, and Sergio Perez in his home Grand Prix, in the Mexican Grand Prix, finishes in P3. Well, Dave, in your case, Lewis Hamilton with the win, Sergio Perez with P2, and George Russell with P3. So instead of a Red Bull 1-3, it's a Mercedes 1-3.
How most of the races have been. You know, there are inciting battles with one being victorious. But yeah, decent race.
In other words, what would you grade this race on a scale of 1 to 20?
I mean, with all the battles and all that, I would say probably 15.5.
An A-, B+, around there?
Yeah.
Do you say the same thing for the penultimate round, which is Brazil? As we come to Brazil for the penultimate round, would you believe it? Red Bull did not lead a single lap. They probably did in the sprint. Well, I don't think they did in the sprint. Not even in the sprint, I don't think.
No.
I figured as much. George Russell won the sprint. I know that. And carried that win in the sprint into the race itself. In other words, George Russell accomplished what was robbed from him in Sakir 2020. George
Mercedes
Russell got the job done, took home the winner's trophy, and won. Not only did he win, it was a Mercedes 1-2 finish with 1.5 seconds separating the two Mercedes drivers. Finally, for once, Mercedes is showing some dominant pace for once in the 2022 season, because George and Lewis were the only two drivers that led all throughout the Brazilian Grand Prix. George, however, led the most laps with 66 out front out of the 71 laps run. Lewis Hamilton led the other 5. Carlos Sainz rounds out the podium with P3, followed by Charles Leclerc in P4. Fernando Alonso with P5 after starting from 17th on the grid, by no doubt is the driver of the day in my book with that. Max Verstappen with P6. We'll get to him in a little bit later. Sergio Perez with P7. Esteban Ocon with P8. Valtteri Bottas with P9. And Lance Stroll once again P10. 3 drivers did not see the checkered flag. Daniel Ricciardo and Kevin Magnussen got themselves in a tangle on the opening lap at the beginning of the slow, tight hairpin section. And again, that was on the opening lap that took place regarding Magnussen and Daniel Ricciardo when they had to come into blows at the first portion of the tight section of hairpins. And Lando Norris also retired following a gearbox problem on lap 50. But again, George Russell, the man of the hour, not only won the race from pole position, he won the sprint a day prior to this race, won the sprint, won the pole, or started the race from pole, led the most laps, won the race, and set fastest lap. But, trump that for a minute, going back to Kevin Magnussen, do you remember the qualifying hour?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the end of qualifying?
Well, Magnussen, luckily enough, he actually got pole.
Dude, in a Haas.
I mean, he got lucky because it was starting to rain, wasn't it?
Yes,
I think
it was.
he
Yes,
just
it was.
got it. Yeah, I mean, he just got lucky. He was out at the right time.
Not the first time that this has happened, because we wind the clock to 2010. Funny enough, at the same place, Nico Hulkenberg, similar situation, got out before the rain came and before the track got a bit damp to drive on, got out at the right time when it was still slick, set the time, got the pole in a Williams. I'm sure you remember that, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Nico Hulkenberg, he's yet to get a podium. Hulkenberg has yet to get a podium, but he's got a pole position to his resume.
I mean, we'll see what happens to him after his contracts expire, because it's up at this season. So we'll see what happens, if he stays or he goes to another team or he's done with F1. We'll see.
Even so, I don't see him getting into a top tier ride anytime soon, if not ever. At least for me speaking. Your top 3 again: Russell, Hamilton, and Carlos Sainz. A Mercedes 1-2 finish, followed by the 2 Ferraris in 3rd and 4th. But regarding Max Verstappen, do you remember the team order that was given to let Checo through? For the sake
Oh yeah, that's
finish runner-up in the championship. But
He
Max
could have
refused.
been second, but no. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I guess that was the point that Checo kind of lost respect for Max in a way.
He even said it on the radio when Checo said, and I quote, "It just goes to show who he really is."
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, are we going to see a rivalry here? And what Max said when he crossed the line, when he got the order, but he ignored it. And he said this on the radio when he crossed the line, and I quote, "I gave my reasons and I stand by it." You know what I mean when I say that, right? We go back to Monaco when Checo crashed in qualifying, when Max was on a qualifying lap when Checo crashed. Max was, from what I can remember and from what I'm gathering, was still bitter about that. When I'm sitting here saying at that point at Brazil, even before Brazil, Red Bull's got the constructors wrapped up. Max won the championship already, so it doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to you? Because it doesn't with me. But regarding the
I have
top
no
three,
problem.
mainly the run Mercedes had in this race, what was going through your mind when Mercedes was on form in this Brazilian Grand Prix from 2022? What was going through your mind? Again, regarding the Mercedes pace in this race.
Just surprised because, well, in the past, Mercedes have been somewhat strong in Brazil. Just because how, it's a smaller track with some elevations, but somehow it works with Mercedes' philosophy of their car. And even though their engine power usually isn't, well, for the 22 season wasn't really the best, somehow they, I guess they turned it up or they found something for that weekend.
It's like they flipped the switch and they were right back on form.
I mean, it's a little too late, but yeah.
Exactly. It was already far too late. But still,
But that, I guess that gave, you know, Hamilton and Russell a little hope for the following season.
but as we talked about in 2020, we're going to 2023 season, as we talked about, it didn't get them nowhere. Yeah, they got podiums, but as far as wins is concerned, that did not happen for 2023 at least. 2022 here in Brazil, we all thought that Mercedes would be winless for the first time since 2011. But with George Russell's win, that changed. And the Mercedes win streak after that point was still going when George won. And frankly, when I watched this race live, I didn't care who came out on top regarding the two Mercedes cars, regarding the two Mercedes drivers. I didn't care who won the race. I just wanted Mercedes to win, whether it be George getting his first win or Lewis extending his winning record. Again, I could care less because I'd be on cloud nine for either one of them. And I was when George crossed the line first and Lewis P2. Once again, your top three: George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes 1-2 finish, followed by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. But before we get into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, this is what the point standings look like. Again, excluding Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc leads in the points, but so too does Checo, as they are level on points, with 290 points being scored with those two drivers. In other words, both Leclerc and Perez scored a total of 290 points heading into the season finale in Abu Dhabi. Kind of giving that vibe to 2021 and 1974 when they enter the final race of the season level on points. Kind of similar to that vibe. And George Russell sits comfortably in third place, 265 points scored. The gap between Leclerc, Perez, and Russell, the gap is 25 points heading into Abu Dhabi. So meaning George can get in the mix if he wins the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but in that same scenario, not only does he win the race, Leclerc and Perez finish outside of the points, Russell would be champion, again excluding Max. Which brings us to the season finale in Abu Dhabi. You can guess who won the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Leclerc won it. Perez in second. Carlos Sainz P3. Though, logically speaking, Max Verstappen won it, having led 57 laps out of the 58 laps run. Max, again, leading 57 of them. Leclerc leading the other lap. So once again, the season finale, Max Verstappen victorious. Number one indeed being the magic number, considering that was Max, his car was number one. And again, Max winning the race, caps off the season on the best way possible with the win, having led all but one lap in the season finale. Max with the win, Charles Leclerc P2, Checo with P3. That's your podium finishes in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Fourth place is Carlos Sainz. Fifth place is George Russell. Sixth place is Lando Norris. Seventh place is Esteban Ocon. P8 for Lance Stroll. P9 for Daniel Ricciardo in his last race for McLaren Colors. And Sebastian Vettel in his last race ever in Formula One finishes 10th. Funny, you want to know a mind-boggling fact or mind-blowing fact? Sebastian Vettel, when he made his debut in Indianapolis 2007 for a Sauber, BMW Sauber as it was called back then, Seb finished P8, but back in those days, the point standings, not the point standings, but the point system was different in 2007. With an 8th place finish, back then you get 1 point. And again, with Seb finishing P8 at the Indianapolis Grand Prix, which was his debut race in 2007, Seb with P8 got 1 point. And here in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2022, Seb's last race in Formula One finishes 10th. But of course, with the change to the point system since 2010, but since 2019, you get a point for fastest lap. But Seb did not get the fastest lap, as that went to Lando Norris. Seb, in his last race in the 2022 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, finishes 10th. But that 10th place finish gets 1 point. Gets 1 point in his first race. Gets 1 point in his last race. Gets 1 point in his first ever race. 1 point in his last ever race. Kind of poetic if you think about it. As we scroll down the order, Yuki Tsunoda with P11 after starting in P11. Zhou Guanyu concludes his rookie campaign with P12 under the lights in Abu Dhabi. Alex Albon with P13 for Williams. Pierre Gasly with P14 in his last race for AlphaTauri before he jumped ship to Alpine the following year. Valtteri Bottas with P15, concluding his first season with the Alfa Romeo outfit. Mick Schumacher in his last race in F1 as of right now. Same for Seb to a degree, considering what the rumors are saying that Seb might come back in a few years with Audi, but those are just rumors. But for Mick Schumacher, in his last race in Formula One up to this point, he finishes P16 in his final outing with the Haas F1 team, getting the better of Kevin Magnussen, who finishes in P17. I cannot speak in this one. Holy moly. Lewis Hamilton, unfortunately, did not see the checkered flag. He was one of the 3 that did not see the checkered flag in this one, as Lewis retired due to a hydraulics problem late in the race. 55 laps in, the hydraulics gave out on Lewis's W13. And for Nicholas Latifi, he caps off the year in his last race in Formula One with an electrical problem. Fernando Alonso also had a mechanical related issue, and he retired on lap 27 in his last race for the Alpine outfit. And again, Lando Norris with the fastest lap of the race in his McLaren, who finishes in P6, but instead of getting 8 points, again, gets that extra point and therefore gets 9 points. Because again, extra point for fastest lap. So, this brings us to the final standings result. But before we get to that, your top three. Max Verstappen with the win, Charles Leclerc with P2, and Sergio Checo Perez with P3. Again, that's your podium for from the season finale in Abu Dhabi. But Dave, in your case, it's Charles Leclerc, Checo, and Carlos Sainz. So instead of a Red Bull 1-3, it's a Ferrari 1-3. We take a look at the driver standings. This is what the final standings look like. So the gap between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc in the final standings is 146 points. And given that Max Verstappen had won 17 races in the 15 races in the 2022 season, at the time, he broke the record for the most wins in a single season, with 15 wins and 17 podium finishes, 7 pole positions as well, leading for 615 laps with an average start of a 3.4 and an average finish of a 3.5. But again, 15 wins in one season. Again, that was the record at the conclusion of the 2022 season. And then he took it to a whole nother level the following year, which Dave and I touched on over a month ago. But the gap regarding Leclerc and Perez, 3 points, separating Leclerc and Perez. As far as the gap between Leclerc and Russell, the gap is 33 points, separating Leclerc and George Russell, who George finished fourth, logically speaking, finishes fourth, but excluding Max, finishes third in the case of George Russell. And, well, again, if you exclude Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc wins the championship. Charles Leclerc wins the championship for Ferrari over Sergio Perez by a very close margin. And George Russell rounding out the point standings in the podium with third place. But again, that's excluding Max Verstappen. But the 2022 driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen, obviously your champion by a country mile. Charles Leclerc with second place. Sergio Perez with P3. George Russell with P4. Carlos Sainz P5. Lewis Hamilton P6. Arguably, this was Lewis's worst season in Formula One. Arguably. Lando Norris in P7. But Lewis still got 9 podiums throughout the 2022 season. So, again, you can argue that it was Lewis's bad or his worst season, given he's in a Mercedes and given Mercedes's dominance that he was able to put up. You could say that it was a bad season, if not the worst season for Lewis Hamilton for 2022 standards, and to an extent 2023. But for 2022, where he finished in the standings, you can debate that. But moving on, Lewis P6, despite 9 podium finishes for him. Lando Norris with that 1 podium in Imola with 7th place in the standings. Esteban Ocon with P8. Fernando Alonso P9. Valtteri Bottas with P10. That's your top 10 in the standings. In the final standings, that is. As we continue to scroll down the order, Daniel Ricciardo with P11. Sebastian Vettel with P12. Kevin Magnussen with P13. Pierre Gasly P14. 15th is Lance Stroll. 16th is Mick Schumacher. 17th is Yuki Tsunoda. 18th is Guan Yu Zhou, who's Rookie of the Year. Rookie of the Year in 2022. That's Juan Yuzo in P18. 19th, Alex Albon. Nicholas Latifi with P20. No surprise. Nick De Vries, 21st in the standings. And last but not least, Nico Hulkenberg with P22. I say Nico Hulkenberg because, Dave, if you remember the beginning of the season, Sebastian Vettel had COVID and had to miss out in the first few races on the schedule, the first two races being Bahrain and Saudi. But regarding the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, your take, in other words, what's your thoughts on the Bahrain, not the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
Is a reason why F1 has kept Abu Dhabi as the finale.
Well, every year since 2014, but it was the season finale also in 2009 and 2010. But to your point, continue.
You know, there's always battles. Sometimes there's, you know, strategies play a factor, especially at this track.
It does with every time,
And
but go ahead.
yeah, just great battles. Just, you know, anything can happen.
And it usually does. I'm going to keep saying that every time you say that line. And regarding the battle between Nicholas Latifi and Mick Schumacher,
As opposed to their collision.
yes,
I mean, we know that that was clearly Schumacher's fault there.
and your take on Lewis Hamilton having that hydraulics issue.
I guess it was somewhat like a leak probably early on when he had that little I guess he was kind of like forced with signs into the chicane. He had to go over the curb.
Reminiscent of 2021, but regarding Max and Lewis, Carlos Sainz even said it himself when he said, and I quote, he did exactly the same thing to Verstappen last year. Deja vu, in a sense. Real quick on Nico Hulkenberg, though, as I said, came in to replace Sebastian Vettel as Seb had COVID. Nico Hulkenberg finished in P17 in Bahrain and finished P12 in Saudi. Just wanted to point that out real fast. I'll get to the Constructors' Championship in a little bit. But despite Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton, for Lewis, deja vu, when Carlos Sainz had to go wide. Wait, did Carlos Sainz go wide or did Lewis Hamilton went wide? I think
Hamilton had to
it
go
was
wide.
Hamilton that went wide. Again, same place, same spot. But this time, instead of Max, it was Carlos Sainz. Same place, same spot. In the case of Carlos Sainz, he would still finish in the points nonetheless, with 4th place in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. In your case, though, it's P3. Now, what would you grade Carlos Sainz? What would you grade his 2022 season, though?
I mean, I would give Carlos Sainz probably like an A-. I mean, he did what he could. I mean, at least he didn't throw away a win like his teammate.
Unlike Charles Leclerc, what's the grade for Leclerc?
I mean, without the reliabilities, I think he probably a B.
Regarding the two.
No, actually, no. I think no. I would say they're both A-.
Both
because they
Ferraris,
had
huh?
well, yeah. I mean, they both had like that horrible strategy in Hungary. Of course,
It was one of the dumbest things.
that was a laughing stock. Leclerc, you know, he threw away the win in France. Reliability problems in Abu Dhabi, Azerbaijan. Yeah, so equally they both had problems. So yeah, equal.
And
So that's why Leclerc just managed to be in second place in the standings.
Oh, in your case, the champion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about the two Mercedes drivers? What would you grade Russell and Lewis's performance?
So it was probably more difficult for Hamilton. Like I said, his side of the garage is more experimental. So yeah, I would put Russell. He's probably like an A minus. No, actually, no. I would say he's probably like I'll put him just a solid A. Yeah, Lewis, he's probably A minus, even though he had more problems.
What about Sebastian Vettel? What would you grade his farewell tour?
It wasn't, I guess, the best, but at least he got points and ended somewhat on a good note. So, I mean, if he had well, I guess if the Aston Martin performed like, well, it will in the following season, of course, he could probably be higher, but I mean, he drove what he could, so he'll probably a B minus.
And Fernando Alonso?
I mean, he always got like almost 110% out of a car, so he's probably like a solid B.
As we take a look at the Constructors' Championship, we went over the Drivers' Championship. Now, this is what the Constructors' Championship looks like. Red Bull win it by default with 759 points. Ferrari are the runners-up with 554 points, followed by Mercedes with P3, Alpine with P4, McLaren with P5, Alfa Romeo with P6, Aston Martin with P7, Haas with P8, AlphaTauri with P9, and Williams at the bottom of the barrel with P10. And the only team to not reach double figures. The gap between Red Bull and Ferrari, if you're wondering, the gap between Red Bull and Ferrari, 205 points. As far as Red Bull and Mercedes are concerned, the gap between those two teams, with Red Bull with the win and Mercedes in P3, the gap between those two, 244 points. And as we look at the fastest lap award, to probably nobody's surprise, Max Verstappen with the most fastest laps throughout the whole 2022 season with 5. And those 5 were at the San Marino Grand Prix, the Vice City Grand Prix, the Austrian Grand Prix, the Belgian Grand Prix, and the Dutch Grand Prix. Needless to say that this was the beginning of Max's dominance in F1. But in this ground effect regs, because again, this is the third generation of hybrids with the Turbo V6 hybrids, the third generation with the ground effect since 2022, which the season we just covered up. Max, the man of the hour. Most wins, most podiums, most fastest laps, most pole positions. Max was on it in 2022, as he was in 2023. But again, 2022 was the beginning. Again, in this era of Formula One with the ground effect. But Dave, I'm going to ask you this. Who impressed you the most throughout the 2022 season?
I would probably have to say Russell. I mean, because this was, his first drive with Mercedes. Well, full time.
I was about to say, you mean full time?
Yeah, full time. And he did better than Hamilton, even though, like I said, Hamilton's side of the garage were more experimental with setups. So But yeah, Russell actually did a very, very good job in his first drive.
And the driver who did not perform to expectations.
Of course, has to be Nick DeVries. Again, it's not him. It's just how Red Bull works, and also that AlphaTauri was complete poo poo. So you know it it didn't really work.
Well, for 2023, but we're going in
Yeah.
2022 on a driver who ran full time.
Well, I mean, for the future, of course, we know what's gonna happen for 22. I mean, I guess I'll have to go with the GOAT, Latifi.
You had to say the GOAT, didn't you?
I had to, because he is.
Yeah, the
Well,
GOAT
he
of
was
finishing in the
the
back all the time.
previous GOAT.
Yeah, the GOAT of finishing
He
in the
was the
back all the
previous
time
GOAT. But now we have a new GOAT.
in Logan
Sargent.
Sargent. And of course, Logan replaced Latifi for the 2023
Mhm.
season, and yet somehow still has arrived, despite how much of a mess his rookie season was, which we touched on in the 2023 recap, as I mentioned before. But regarding your champion, in your case, Charles Leclerc, which race stood out regarding Leclerc's championship season in 2022? It could be good, it could be bad, it could be both.
I'm gonna have to go with the first race, Bahrain.
With the 1-2 finish.
But also, he kind of outsmarted Max a few times, so
Reminiscent of Saudi, but it didn't. He still got a podium though, but second place. But as far as a win, Max still got him. I tell
well,
you
I'm
that.
saying, he outsmarted him, for Bahrain that, he let Max get the lead into the first turn, but going to the turn
Yeah, the battle
the 3 and
between
4, he would get back on.
the battle that those two had at Bahrain, that was an epic battle, if I do say so myself.
I mean, it was almost similar to
If you say Rosberg and
2014,
Hamilton
where
2014,
yeah,
I
but
knew
they
it.
were like more close. This was just the battle of the DRS, which of course,
Well, even in 2014, the DRS
Leclerc,
was a thing.
but they were closer. But this was, Hamilton and Rosberg were close the whole track, while during the straight, Max was close even though he was farther back.
And yet, despite that, he would still go for that late lunge, the dive bomb, you could say.
Yes.
I swear, the battle that Charles and Max put on in the season opener in 2022, that had me on my toes, given how close it was. But in the end, Max retired with a mechanical problem, and Leclerc was the one who came out on top. We all thought this was
Mhm.
it for Ferrari. But look what happened. Look what happened. But in that sense, in your case, Dave, Charles Leclerc won the championship regardless. But realistically speaking and logically speaking, Max was just he was basically in a different galaxy, a completely different world, and just whipped the floor with everybody. And you would take it to another level the following year, which again, we covered up. But the start of this, you could argue was 2016. Well, when he won the Spanish Grand Prix is what I'm referring to. But when he was winning on a consistent basis, that was 2021 when he won 10 times, arguably 9 times. If you know why I say that, if you know, you know. But
Mhm.
We've covered up the 2023 season months ago. We covered it up a month ago, or over a month or two ago. We covered up the 2022 season now. Dave, out of the 2 seasons we've covered up, which one was your favorite one? Again, regarding the 2 that we've covered up so far.
I mean, I kind of like the 22 just because Ferrari, kind of showed a bit of a battle in the first half.
But then the second half, yeah, they were there, but they were nowhere close to Max and Red Bull. Nowhere close. And Ferrari, they were nowhere near where Mercedes were and where Red Bull was in 2021 either. Yeah, they got pole positions with courtesy of Charles Leclerc at Baku and Monaco, but Ferrari, spoiler alert, went winless in 2021. Would you believe it? They went winless that year. And that was the year, I'm sure at this point, us F1 fans all remember very vividly. The 2021 Formula One season, which we will cover up at some point down the line, since we already covered up the 2023 season, the 2022 season. Again, we're going down. We're going down the years. So again, 2023 and 2022, those years are already covered up. Next in line is 2021. Whenever that will be, time will tell. Another thing I do want to touch on at some point in this podcast station, we rank the drivers from each season. There's no way we're gonna do that as we go over the race results, and then after that we rank the drivers. No way we do that in one go. So because of that, we're gonna do it separate, where one side we go over the race results and the key moments and key factors of a certain race or certain race weekend, or certain things leading up to the race weekend. And then the other recording session we will have, again, for a corresponding year, let's say for this one, 2022, we rank all the drivers and how they did. But again, ain't no way we're going to do all that in one sitting. No way. So that's why the race results and ranking the drivers separate. So for now, race results. Whenever the drivers ranking will be, we're going to start off with 2023 and work our way down, like we're doing right now with the race results. Again, we covered up 2023 over a month or two ago. We just covered up the 2022 campaign. And again, that being said, up next, 2021. Oh boy. Oh boy, 2021. That season. Which is a story for another day. As this is where we will pretty much call off the recording session on that note, since we've got the race results. All 22 race results, or 22 or 23 race results from the 2022 Formula One season. We've covered up every single race, key moments, the race results, who did well, who did not do so well, the driver standings, the constructor standings. We've pretty much covered up everything here for the 2022 season. So again, not much left to say, since again, we've covered up what we covered up. Again, next in line is the 2021 season. I know I keep sugarcoating that, but once again, last time I'm going to say this, the 2021 season in review, that's a story and a recording for another time. And in other words, this is where this session comes to its conclusion. Dave, like numerous podcasts you were on, and we did, It's been fun doing this with you.
Yeah, this has been great. And look forward to the next one.
Agreed. Oh, one more thing. One more thing. Regarding the 2022 season, though, which race stands out to you? Bahrain aside.
I guess I will have to say Brazil. Because
Same.
that's,
You and me
you know,
both.
yeah.
Why? Well, Mercedes. Well, Mercedes fans, and Mercedes came out on top. They flipped the switch and they were on it in that race. But it's a shame that it was already too late. And because of the fact the following round, they went right back to square one. But at the end of the day, they still got the win. So that's all that matters. Not only race win, but a pole position, both courtesy of George Russell. Again, George with the pole at the Hungarian Grand Prix and with the win in Brazil. Hats off to George in that sense. But to your point, Dave, you and me both. Brazil stands out. I wonder which race stands out for the 2021 edition. Well, of course, there's numerous, but I wonder which one stands out, like the main race. One race alone that stands out that sums up 2021 as a whole. But again, that's a story for another time, as we will end the recording session on this note. Once again, Dave, it's been fun doing this, as it has with the rest of the podcast that we've done.
Yes.
It's been fun doing this.
Same here.
And again, regarding the 2021 season, we're going to cover that up for another time, as well as the drivers' rankings. We're going to start with 2023, though, and move our way down. But again, whenever those will be, time will tell. Until then, Dave, do you have any final sayings on the 2022 season? Like a conclusion?
Pretty exciting first half for some drivers and team, but you know, kind of fell off or went all over the place in the second half, which was kind of unpredictable for some teams and drivers.
Depending on which teams and drivers you look at. One last thing. Which car from 2022 stands out?
I would say the Ferrari.
The F175
Mm-hmm.
with 4 wins. 3 to Charles Leclerc at the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Australian Grand Prix, and the Austrian Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz with the win in Silverstone. For me personally, it's the Red Bull RB18. It's a tie between that and the Mercedes W13. It's a tie between the Red Bull and the Mercedes. But with that note out of the way, this is where we will end the recording session. Not only because we've got everything, well, mainly because we've got everything that's touched on, that's covered up. So, that being said, until the next one, this is Turn 4 Productions signing off the mic as always. And until next time, and for the notice, peace out, stay safe, and have a good one. Dave, if you have if you can say your final saying.
Till next time.